The sky stretched endlessly above, painted in soft hues as birds soared gracefully over the vast and triumphant empire of Ares. Below, the city pulsed with life. Citizens bustled through the grand streets, moving past an enormous statue that loomed over the square like a silent guardian of the empire's glory. Armed guards patrolled diligently, their presence a testament to the kingdom's proclaimed peace. One of the patrolling officers, a mustachioed man, leaned toward his companion and commented on how serene the empire had become. However, his tone carried an air of caution, for in his years of service, he had learned never to trust quiet too much. Trouble, especially from rebels, always had a way of emerging when least expected. These rebels, remnants of small kingdoms long absorbed into the empire's dominion, still harbored the embers of resistance. Some spoke of their potential to rise again, to ignite an uprising that could fracture the empire's stability. The mustachioed guard's companion, however, scoffed at the notion. He speculated that perhaps the rebels had finally come to their senses, realized the futility of their struggle, and abandoned their cause. The mustachioed guard, however, was not so easily convinced. He found the recent calm unsettling, as though something unseen lurked beneath the surface. Perhaps the empire's elite knights had already taken care of the issue in secret. Regardless, he muttered a silent wish for the peace to last. But elsewhere, far from the patrols of the empire's guards, peace was the last thing on certain minds. In a dimly lit chamber, a man stood before a gathered group, his expression fierce as he declared that the only way to reclaim their lost kingdom was to assassinate the emperor and topple the entire empire. His words hung in the air, met with a mixture of unease and contemplation. Those around him exchanged glances, their expressions betraying the weight of such a proposal. If they were to proceed, they would need someone to spearhead their mission. It was at this moment that the story's true protagonist emerged. Count Logan McLean, a man of sharp intellect and unwavering resolve, sat in the same chamber. As a strategist, he knew that rash actions led to ruin. He listened in silence, offering no immediate reaction to the radical suggestion. A fellow strategist in the room turned to him, stating with grave seriousness that the Book of Visions must never fall into the wrong hands. Logan, understanding the gravity of the statement, simply nodded. He was well aware of the significance the book held. Without another word, he rose from his seat and exited the chamber, his mind already consumed with planning against the Ares Empire. As Logan stepped into the corridor, a young boy approached him, eyes shining with admiration. He addressed Logan with a tone of reverence, calling him a true patriot. Logan, caught off guard by the statement, furrowed his brow and demanded to know what the boy meant. In response, the boy elaborated on the importance of the Book of Visions, explaining how countless comrades had sacrificed themselves over generations to safeguard it. The Empire, too, understood its significance and had made it a top priority to retrieve it. Despite the danger, Logan had taken on the burden willingly, shouldering the risk without hesitation. But Logan's expression darkened. The boy spoke as though he had accepted this mission by choice. Logan corrected him, his voice low but firm. He had never volunteered for this. The boy, undeterred, pointed out that Logan was one of the few fluent in the ancient language required to decipher the book. Accepting this burden, carrying it in silence, was a mark of patriotism. Logan's eyes burned with something deeper than duty. He snapped at the boy, telling him to stop speaking such nonsense. To frame this as patriotism was to insult the memory of those who had fallen. This wasn't about loyalty to a cause, it was about vengeance. As he uttered those words, his mind drifted back to the past, to a time when he was just a boy, overshadowed by the brilliance of his younger brother Ronian. He remembered the whispers of the household servants, the quiet conversations of the nobility. Ronian, they said, had begun wielding a sword at the mere age of 3. He was a prodigy, a genius destined for greatness. In contrast, Logan had spent 10 grueling years undergoing knight training, yet he could never match his younger brother's natural talent. Among the nobles, there were murmurs of uncertainty about the McLean family's future. What would become of them with a failure like Logan as the eldest son? As time passed, the weight of that judgment only grew heavier. He remembered the day his father, consumed with rage, slammed his fist against a table, accusing him of the unthinkable poisoning Ronian with a paralyzing toxin. The accusation burned, but Logan had no defense. His father's voice rang through the halls, condemning him as a jealous traitor who had harmed his own blood out of envy. His judgment was swift and brutal. Logan was to leave immediately. He was no longer a son of the McLean family. Stripped of his title and honor, Logan wandered for a decade. He took on the life of a mercenary, traveling from battlefield to battlefield, trying to carve out a new existence. Yet, no matter how much time passed, he could never escape the shame that clung to him. It was only when it was far too late that he realized just how pathetic he had been. Then came the moment that shattered everything. In the city square, gossiping women whispered about an impending execution. The condemned man, they said, was none other than Ronian McLean, the same younger brother Logan had been exiled for supposedly harming. He had fought bravely against the Empire's forces but had ultimately been captured. Logan's heart pounded in his chest. He had to see him, had to speak to him, even if it was just once. He silently begged for his brother to live, to endure. But when he arrived at the square, all that awaited him was the chilling sight of a blood-stained guillotine. His brother, bound and helpless, was about to be executed. A soldier on the stage raised his voice for the crowd to hear, proclaiming that this was the fate of anyone foolish enough to oppose the Empire. Logan's entire world crumbled. The Empire had not only stolen his family but had made a spectacle of their deaths. In that moment, he swore vengeance. He would not stop until the Empire paid in blood. That oath led him to this moment, sprinting through the labyrinthine streets of the Empire's castle, pursued by guards. They shouted after him, accusing him of stealing the Book of Visions. He pushed forward, but his path was cut off a dead end. There was no escape. His only option was to fight. A guard lunged at him first, blade gleaming in the dim torchlight. Logan barely managed to deflect the strike before finding an opening. He countered swiftly, disarming the soldier before delivering a fatal slash to his throat. Another guard cursed and charged forward, but Logan, acting without hesitation, plunged his weapon into the man's chin, silencing him instantly. More enemies emerged, their intent murderous. Logan fought, his movements fueled by desperation and fury, cutting down each opponent who dared stand in his way. But it was futile. More soldiers appeared, surrounding him. They demanded the return of the stolen book, their swords poised for the final strike. Logan knew this was the end. A faint, bitter smile curled on his lips. If he was going to die, he would take them all with him. With that thought, he crushed a strange stone in his palm. Instantly, an explosion erupted, engulfing the entire castle in fire and chaos. As everything faded into darkness, Logan drifted in a void, lost in his regrets. Even in death, he could not escape them. He had sought vengeance, but was it enough? No. He should have asked for his brother's forgiveness. If there was an afterlife, perhaps he would see his family again. Perhaps then he could make amends. Then, abruptly, he awoke. His head throbbed, wrapped in bandages. Pain lanced through his body. But how? How could he feel pain if he was supposed to be dead? As Logan walked through the long, dimly lit corridors of the McLean estate, his very presence sent ripples of unease through the servants. The maids, usually composed in their duties, faltered upon seeing him. Some slipped away into the shadows, preferring to avoid his gaze entirely, while others carried on, albeit with nervous, hurried steps. One unfortunate maid, however, found herself caught in a disastrous moment. Carrying a towering stack of bedsheets, her vision obstructed by the sheer volume of the linens, she failed to notice his approach. The moment she did, her hands trembled, and with an audible gasp, the sheets slipped from her grasp, cascading onto the polished floor in a chaotic heap right before Logan's feet. A sharp breath caught in her throat as she froze in place, her mind racing with panic. Her heart pounded, fear gripping her as she realized the gravity of what had just happened. Was this the end for her? Had she sealed her fate with a single clumsy mistake? The tales whispered in the servant quarters spoke of the young master's cold nature, his ruthless demeanor. How was she supposed to atone for such a blunder? Before she could crumble under the weight of her fears, a gentle hand extended towards her. "Are you all right?" Logan's voice was calm, lacking any trace of anger or irritation. The maid hesitantly nodded, though her fear only grew when she dared to look up at him. His face, one she had spent years dreading, was now so close, and yet it bore none of the malice she had always imagined. Still, unable to suppress her panic, she threw herself to the ground, her forehead nearly touching the cold floor as she pleaded for forgiveness, insisting she had committed an unforgivable sin. Logan blinked in surprise, momentarily at a loss. What had just happened? Why was she reacting this way? He had simply asked if she was all right. He watched as she trembled before him, as if awaiting some cruel punishment, and a deep sense of discomfort settled in his chest. He had expected the servants to be cautious around him, but this was extreme. How could someone change their behavior so drastically overnight? Then it dawned on him they weren't changing. They were merely reacting to who he had been before. The realization weighed on him, but he reminded himself that with time, things would shift. They would come to see that he was not the same man they once feared. Slowly, he turned his gaze toward a nearby mirror. Staring into his own reflection, he let a small, wry smile play upon his lips. "It's not that strange," he murmured, as if convincing himself. Elsewhere in the estate, in the vast and solemn chambers of the McLean family patriarch, an aging servant carefully approached, his voice steady yet holding a note of apprehension. "Master, the young lord has returned." Those words sent a ripple of tension through the room. At the sound of them, Logan, who had been waiting outside the grand doors, felt his body stiffen. His fingers curled slightly as memories came rushing back, unbidden and sharp. He could still hear the words his father had spoken to him on the day of his exile, the cold, unforgiving sentence that had cast him out, severing his ties to the family name. "You are no son of mine." Those words had carved themselves into his soul, branding him with a shame that had never truly faded. At the time, he had believed his father had completely given up on him, that his heart had turned to stone in the wake of his disgrace. Even after the duel, even after his struggles, his father had never once come to see him. But standing here now, awaiting his presence, Logan felt the weight of his own foolishness. How desolate must a father feel to reach the point of abandoning his own son? Had he ever considered that perspective? The grand doors creaked open, and the light from the chamber spilled outward, casting a glow upon Logan's figure. He stepped inside, his heartbeat steady, yet beneath his composure, emotions warred within him. His father stood near the grand window, gazing outside where the light was brightest. For a long moment he did not turn, as if contemplating something distant and unreachable. Then, finally, he shifted his attention to Logan. Their eyes met. Logan's breath caught in his throat. He had rehearsed this moment in his head countless times, and yet, standing here now, he felt as though he had already lost before the first word was spoken. But in his mind, one thing was clear: he regretted everything. A silent apology formed in his heart, one he could not voice aloud, and yet it burned within him with intensity. The patriarch regarded him for a moment before speaking, his tone devoid of warmth. "What is it that you want?" Logan hesitated. His father had not changed. His words still carried the same cold weight, the same indifference that had once cast him out. But Logan understood now 20 years had passed for him, but for his father, it had only been a handful of days since the last time he had seen his son's face. Gathering himself, Logan finally voiced his request. He wished to train in isolation within the McLean family's lands. His mind, however, was already working beyond that. In truth, his goal extended far beyond personal training. If he was to win the impending regional war, he needed to fortify the entire territory, strengthen the ranks of knights and soldiers, refine weaponry, and employ strategic advancements. But all of this required one crucial resource: money. And the McLean family, known throughout the kingdom as the beggar household, had none. Still, Logan knew that within 3 months, an event would occur, an event that, if utilized correctly, could grant them a year's worth of budget in one decisive stroke. But before he could execute this plan, he needed to hone his martial skills to perfection. His father's gaze did not waver as he considered Logan's words. "Are you running away because you lost to your brother?" he asked, his tone unwavering. Logan, caught off guard, quickly denied it. "No, it's not that." He paused before adding, "I've come to understand just how inadequate I have been. I refuse to remain the same. Even if I'm late, I want to make up for it." His father's expression remained unreadable, but his silence was telling. "It's not just a lack of effort," the patriarch eventually muttered. "Have you finally come to terms with reality?" Logan nodded, acknowledging his past arrogance. He admitted that, for far too long, he had blamed others, refusing to acknowledge his own shortcomings. "I was foolish and immature," he said. "Through this training, I hope to change that." The room fell silent for a moment before the patriarch let out a quiet sigh. "It's not a weak excuse this time," he admitted. "How long?" 3 months, Logan replied, his father's brows furrowed. "And you think you can catch up to Ronian in such a short time?" Logan hesitated. "I'm not doing this to defeat Ronian," he clarified. "I simply want to do my best." The patriarch studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Very well, you may train." Logan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to leave, but just as he reached the door, his father's voice stopped him once more. "It's still spring," he said, his tone unreadable. "The lands will be cold at night. Make sure you stay warm." Logan froze. The words were simple, but they carried something unexpected, something faintly resembling care. He turned, allowing a genuine smile to cross his lips, and nodded. Days later, deep within the vast expanse of the McLean family's private lands, Logan stood in the midst of the dense forest. Only those of McLean blood were permitted to enter this area, making it the perfect place for isolated training. Taking a deep breath, he let his gaze sweep across the endless trees before pulling out a worn yet precious book. The title shimmered faintly under the dappled sunlight, filtering through the branches the secrets of the divine swords. A determined glint shone in his eyes as he opened the book. This was just the beginning. Logan stood firm, his expression unwavering as he waited for the guard's reaction. The moment his glove struck Dominic's face, the air in the corridor grew heavy with tension. The knights who had once mocked him now stood in stunned silence, their disbelief evident. To issue a duel so publicly, and to a guard no less, was a bold move. Yet Logan remained composed, his gaze steady as he observed the man before him. Dominic, caught off guard, was momentarily frozen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Moments ago, he had dismissed Logan with an air of superiority, treating him like a mere nuisance, but now he found himself in an entirely different situation, one he could not easily escape without tarnishing his own reputation. The rules of a noble duel were clear. A challenge issued in such a manner could not simply be ignored, not without consequences. By remaining silent, Dominic would be seen as weak, a man unwilling to defend his honor. Yet accepting meant risking humiliation at the hands of the very person he had just scorned. The gathered knights murmured among themselves, some shifting uneasily, while others watched with intrigued expressions. None of them had expected Logan, once the disgraced son of the McLean family, to take such a stand. His sudden challenge disrupted the narrative. They had long believed the belief that he was nothing more than a failure, a shadow cast by his younger brother's brilliance. Logan, however, was not concerned with their thoughts. He had not issued this challenge on a whim. Every action he took now was deliberate, each step carefully calculated. His training in the forest had not merely been for personal growth, it was preparation for moments like this, moments where he could begin reshaping his reputation. The months of grueling effort, of honing his skills beyond their previous limits, had all led to this point. If he was to reclaim his standing, if he was to demand the respect he had once lost, he needed to start somewhere. And what better way than by proving, in front of those who doubted him, that he was no longer the man they thought he was. Dominic's face darkened as he clenched his fists, realizing there was no way out. He was a knight in service to the McLean family. Backing down from a challenge, especially in the presence of his fellow knights, was not an option. He knew the implications all too well. Cowardice was not tolerated among warriors. Refusing to fight would not only damage his pride, but would forever mark him as a man who shrank before adversity. And so, whether he liked it or not, he had no choice but to face Logan. The knights around them stirred, anticipation mounting as they braced for the inevitable duel. Logan remained motionless, his expression calm yet resolute. He had no doubts about the outcome. His body had undergone immense refinement, his ability sharpened to a degree he had never reached before. Where once he had struggled, now he moved with certainty, every step calculated, every movement precise. The training had not only transformed his body, but his mind as well. No longer was he shackled by the insecurities of his past. He knew what he was capable of now, and more importantly, he knew exactly how to demonstrate it. The tension in the air grew thick as Dominic, now seething with rage, finally accepted the challenge. The battle arena was soon filled with murmurs and laughter as the knights gathered around to witness the duel. None of them believed Logan had any chance of victory. Whispers of his past failure echoed through the crowd, knights placing bets on how long he would last before being utterly defeated. To them, he was still the same disgraced son of the McLean family, the one who had been beaten so badly by his younger brother that he had fled to hide for months. They scoffed at the idea that he could now stand against a knight, dismissing his presence as nothing more than a desperate attempt at reclaiming lost pride. Logan listened, his irritation simmering beneath the surface. No one expected him to win. Not a single one of them believed he had changed. A knight standing nearby chuckled, glancing at Logan before casually warning him to be careful not to get hurt. Logan, ignoring the remark, studied Dominic carefully. The man who had insulted him so openly now seemed far less confident. In truth, Dominic had only dared to act arrogantly when he was surrounded by his peers, but now, faced with a direct challenge, his bravado wavered. He was nothing more than a fool who played at being strong. In the distance, Rick observed the scene with disbelief, struggling to comprehend that his master was truly going through with the duel. The duel was formally announced, and for safety reasons, it was decided that wooden swords would be used. Logan understood their reasoning. Without real blades, the risk of injury was reduced. However, he also knew that a power-based knight like Dominic could still kill with a wooden sword if he applied enough force. Despite this, the duel was allowed to proceed, and Dominic, already fueled by frustration, saw no reason to hold back. The moment they took their positions, he activated his mana core. A collective gasp rippled through the spectators. The knights had expected Dominic to take it easy, but instead, he was using his full power. His mana core flared brightly, its unstable energy leaking out, a clear sign that he could not fully control it. Some knights muttered among themselves, wondering if this was even allowed. Was it not an unfair advantage? But Logan, standing across from Dominic with an air of complete calm, showed no sign of intimidation. If anything, he found it amusing. The energy was wild, unrefined, and most importantly, a clear indication that Dominic was not in full control of his strength. As if sensing Logan's indifference, Dominic grew impatient. The knight's pride had already taken enough damage. He had to finish this quickly and prove that Logan's challenge was nothing but foolishness. Charging forward, he moved with full force, his entire body surging with mana as he prepared to unleash his secret technique. The knights in the audience panicked, shouting for him to take it easy, but Dominic ignored them. He had decided this would end in one swift strike. Logan did not move. He simply watched. His focus was sharp, his mind clear. His body, honed by months of rigorous training, instinctively adjusted to the movement before him. The moment Dominic lunged, Logan reacted. With effortless precision, he sidestepped the incoming strike, avoiding it completely. In the same motion, he countered with a swift, calculated blow. Dominic barely had time to process what had happened before he was sent crashing to the ground, his weapon knocked from his grasp. The crowd fell silent. Logan stood tall, gazing down at the knight who had so confidently mocked him just moments ago. It had taken only a single exchange. Disbelief spread among the knights as they processed what they had just witnessed. Logan, whom they had ridiculed, had just defeated Dominic with no resistance. Their shock deepened as realization dawned. He was a core user. Though he had not openly displayed his power before, it was now evident that his strength had undergone a transformation. It was not merely that he had improved. It was as if he had become a completely different warrior, someone who had wielded a sword for decades. Without hesitation, Logan called for the referee. He wanted to give Dominic another chance. The referee, though surprised, nodded and knelt beside Dominic, asking if he was capable of continuing. The knight, dazed and humiliated, barely understood what was happening. His mind raced. Had he truly been bested by someone he had considered a weakling? Had he, a knight, fallen before a mere noble? Refusing to accept reality, he made a desperate decision. With sudden aggression, he attempted to strike at Logan while he was unprepared, but Logan was already anticipating it. With an expression of complete indifference, he delivered a powerful strike, sending Dominic flying backward. His body hit the ground hard, leaving him stunned. The knights watching were speechless. Logan observed his opponent for a moment before shaking his head, commenting that he had even been generous enough to offer a second chance. Yet Dominic had proven unworthy of it. The knight lay motionless, struggling to regain his breath. However, Logan was not finished. He had shown mercy to a vassal who had dared to defy his superior. That was more than enough leniency. Now it was time for punishment. Without hesitation, Logan advanced, striking Dominic repeatedly. The knight, once arrogant, now lay on the ground, desperately begging for mercy. The blows continued, relentless and precise. The knights who had once doubted Logan now watched in growing horror. This was not the same young master they had known before. In just 3 months, he had become something entirely different. Stronger, sharper, unforgiving. His skills had not just improved, they had transcended their previous limits. He was no longer a joke, he was a force to be reckoned with. As the duel finally concluded, the referee stepped forward and announced the winner. Logan McLean had emerged victorious. Elsewhere, within the chambers of the Patriarch, Logan's father sat in quiet contemplation. He had heard everything. Every action his son had taken, every display of strength, had been relayed to him. Though outwardly calm, his mind raced with questions. Logan had changed. That much was undeniable. His strength, his composure, everything about him was different. Finally he spoke, acknowledging that his son's actions were impressive. Something had happened during his training, something that had turned him into the warrior standing before him now. Logan answered simply. He had abandoned his ambition, he had let go of everything, and in that emptiness, in that clarity, he had found the strength to form his core. In his mind, he understood that his words might seem like a lie. No one could easily believe such a transformation, but he knew the truth. In his past life, it had taken him decades, 40 long years of hardship and revenge, before he had finally unlocked his core. Now fate had given him a second chance. His father listened in silence before nodding. He understood. Logan had indeed changed. Logan, without hesitation or fear, stood his ground before his father, declaring that the knight had deserved everything that had happened to him. He asked the Patriarch if he was aware of the rumors that the knights had been spreading. His father, unwavering as ever, acknowledged that he had heard them. Logan pressed further, questioning whether his actions had truly been unnecessary. The Patriarch, however, raised an eyebrow, asking if it was necessary to go to such lengths. Without the slightest courtesy, Logan asserted that it absolutely was. His father, taken aback by his son's resolute response, scrutinized him carefully. The protagonist explained his reasoning without hesitation. The knight had not merely been insulting him, but had been trying to damage the reputation of the Patriarch himself. If left unpunished, such behavior would corrode the discipline of the family's knights and servants. A hierarchy existed for a reason. It was the foundation of any well-structured organization. If that hierarchy were allowed to weaken, the entire structure would collapse, leading to disorder. In his mind, Logan recalled the lessons he had learned in his previous life, having lived as a mercenary for 10 long years. He understood the way warriors functioned, how men who wielded weapons respected only one thing: strength. To command them, one had to assert dominance in a single decisive move, crushing any resistance before it could spread. The events of today served as a warning to the other knights, ensuring that they would never dare to cross him in the future. The patriarch, after a long moment of silence, acknowledged Logan's logic. He agreed that Dominic had been in the wrong. He had overstepped his place and had even attempted to deceive Logan. However, despite his wrongdoing, the patriarch stated that Logan's actions had still been reckless. He warned his son to exercise more restraint in the future. Logan was slightly taken aback by how quickly his father had forgiven him. He had expected a harsher punishment, some form of reprimand, yet his father was merely advising caution. Suspicious of this unexpected leniency, Logan asked directly if something was wrong. If his father truly wanted to punish him, he should simply do so. His father, with his usual stern demeanor, clarified that just because he was allowing this incident to pass did not mean Logan was entirely in the right. He warned his son not to deceive himself. Furthermore, Logan had yet to receive an official title or rank, meaning he had no real authority over the knights just yet. Until that changed, he should be careful with how he exerted his influence. Logan accepted this with a nod, storing the information away for later use. Then, his father mentioned something unexpected: his fiancée would be arriving soon. Logan's eyes widened slightly at the news. His betrothed, Princess Rina, was finally coming to see him. Amused by the timing, he thought to himself that his cash cow had arrived. The castle was soon abuzz with anticipation as the princess's arrival approached. When she finally entered, all eyes were drawn to her. The knights and servants alike were captivated by her beauty. Her grace, her elegance, everything about her left an impression. A guard nearby muttered that Logan was incredibly lucky to have such a stunning woman as his fiancée. Rina introduced herself formally to the patriarch, who observed her carefully before commenting on how much she had matured. From the sidelines, Rick also noted how much she had changed. The last time he had seen her, she had been a mere child, but now she had grown into an unbelievably beautiful young woman. Despite this, Logan remained completely uninterested. Unlike the others, he felt no excitement or joy at her arrival. Even though she was his fiancée, he should have been the happiest one in the room, yet his expression was unreadable. Something felt off. Then, the moment of truth arrived. Rina pulled out a letter entrusted to her by Count Bolds. She began reading its contents aloud. As time passed, the knights and guards grew increasingly restless. 30 minutes later, they were outright complaining the letter was too long. However, the closing words silenced them entirely. With a steady voice, Rina announced that, due to unavoidable circumstances, her family wished to break off the engagement between her and Logan. A hush fell over the castle. The weight of her words pressed upon everyone present. Logan, analyzing the situation with cold precision, quickly deduced the truth hidden within the message. This wasn't merely about circumstances, this was about him. The Count had deemed Logan unworthy, unfit to be his daughter's husband. He had taken one look at Logan's fallen status and grim aura, and decided that his daughter deserved better. The patriarch of the McLean family responded with immediate outrage. His voice thundered across the room as he declared that breaking the engagement in such a manner was nothing short of an insult. He saw through the facade House Bolds was openly attempting to humiliate them. His fury was palpable, radiating throughout the room like a storm. Rina, however, maintained her composure. She firmly denied that their intentions were malicious. She had come in person precisely to prevent any misunderstandings. With sincerity in her voice, she spoke of her childhood memories, of the moments she had spent visiting the McLean estate, of the times she had shared with Logan. Those were precious days to her, and she would always cherish them. However, she was bound by duty. As a noble, she had no choice but to obey her father's will. It was not of her own volition that she was here delivering this message. She was merely following orders. The maids whispered among themselves, commenting that the princess's heart was just as beautiful as her face. She had handled the situation with grace, without malice or cruelty. However, Logan's stepmother, Marian Sios, the mother of Ronian, was far from satisfied. She had always viewed Logan as an obstacle to her own son's path to success, but family honor was an entirely different matter. She turned her piercing gaze toward Rina, pressing her for further clarification. Why was she truly breaking the engagement? What were these so-called unavoidable circumstances? Rina hesitated before offering an apology. She claimed she did not know the reason herself, but Marian did not let it go. She asked if Rena truly had no idea about her own marriage situation. It seemed absurd that she had been given no details about such an important matter. The princess, maintaining her composure, explained that she was merely a daughter who had been designated to marry into another noble family. Her father did not discuss significant family affairs with her. She was simply following his instructions. Still unsatisfied, Marion pointed out that, from their perspective, the princess had just walked into the McLean estate to declare the annulment of an engagement without providing a single valid reason. Could they be expected to simply accept such an insult? Rena finally revealed the compensation that House Bolds was offering, a staggering sum of 3 million gold. The financial manager's breath hitched. That was an enormous amount of money, far more than expected. Logan, meanwhile, felt a rush of excitement. That amount was more than he could have hoped for. If I can get my hands on that money, he thought to himself, already plotting how to utilize it. But before he could entertain the idea further, the patriarch erupted in pure fury. His overwhelming presence flooded the room, an aura of authority so immense that it forced everyone to their knees. The castle itself seemed to tremble beneath his rage. How dare they? The insult was beyond measure. To not only break the engagement but to throw money at them as if they could be bought off? House Bolds had crossed a line, and the patriarch of the McLean family would not allow such disgrace to go unchallenged. As soon as the patriarch's overwhelming pressure filled the room, forcing everyone to their knees, one of Rena's attendants quickly stepped forward, urging the princess to retreat. At the same time, a knight from House Wolves, standing tall and composed, politely asked the patriarch to calm himself so that the discussion could continue in a civil manner. The patriarch's sharp gaze settled on the knight, taking in the man's posture, presence, and the way he carried himself. He had the air of someone with significant authority, impressive, given his relatively young age. Though reluctant to rein in his fury, the patriarch acknowledged the knight's rank and the fact that, in the end, House Wolves had not sent just anyone to negotiate this delicate matter. However, despite agreeing to listen, the patriarch did not let go of his grudge so easily. In a tone laced with cold amusement, he remarked that injuring the rising star of House Wolves would be a fair trade for the humiliation inflicted upon House McLean. His words sent a ripple of unease through the onlookers, but the knight from House Wolves remained unfazed. With practiced diplomacy, he countered that the patriarchs of both houses regarded Logan's father as a man of great honor. He further stated that the elders had already decided they would not seek punishment for the princess, reinforcing the idea that the separation should proceed without hostility. Rena took the opportunity to step forward, her voice steady as she addressed the patriarch directly. She insisted that their intention was never to buy House McLean's honor with money. Instead, she requested that he accept this compensation as a gesture of goodwill and solidarity between the two families. The patriarch, in deep thought, understood what was at play. If he continued pushing the matter, demanding satisfaction beyond this settlement, he would appear as nothing more than a man desperately clinging to wounded pride, exactly the image that House Wolves wanted to paint of him. In the end, he made his decision. Visitors were guests, and House McLean did not harass those who came in peace. He accepted the terms presented by House Wolves, but with one firm condition: Rena must apologize to Logan personally. He refused any other form of compensation. The guards and knights around them murmured amongst themselves, impressed by the patriarch's nobility in rejecting wealth for the sake of pride. But Logan was not about to let things end there. Without hesitation, he spoke up, calling for his father's attention. As someone directly involved in the engagement, he had a request to make, and he asked that his father hear him out. Internally, he knew that he had to secure those 3 million gold at all costs. Casting aside all courtesy, Logan bluntly pointed out the reality of their situation. Half of House McLean's funding came from his stepmother's family. Once the engagement was broken, that support would disappear, and without it, their entire household would collapse into financial ruin. Talking about honor at a time like this was foolish. What mattered was securing those 3 million gold to keep their house afloat. His father's expression darkened at his words. He was outraged at the suggestion, demanding to know if Logan was asking him to go back on his word. The weight of the patriarch's fury was immense, and for a brief moment, Logan faltered under its pressure. However, he steeled himself and pushed forward. He declared that money was more important than his own life. The house could not afford to reject this offer. The patriarch, unwavering, responded that House McLean was not so poor that they would abandon their honor for mere gold. He believed in upholding their dignity above all else. Taking a deep breath, Logan met his father's gaze head-on. Without hesitation, he stated the truth. They were that poor. They were extremely poor. More than that, the house was in crippling debt. House McLean owed more than 3 million gold to the bank, and the annual interest alone was over 150,000. Without his stepmother's financial backing, they would already be bankrupt. A stunned silence filled the room. Everyone, guards, knights, servants, stood in shock at Logan's words. Logan continued, his voice unwavering. House McLean wasn't merely struggling, they were the poorest noble family in the entire kingdom. The reason for accepting the 3 million had nothing to do with honor. The patriarch, after a long pause, asked if Logan truly believed that accepting the money was a matter of honor. Logan responded with calculated reasoning. House Wolves held a higher standing than House McLean. If they simply accepted the engagement's dissolution with nothing more than an apology, rumors would spread that House McLean had been discarded without resistance. That perception would be far more damaging than simply taking the compensation. Rena, maintaining her composure, insisted that House Wolves was not an irrational family. They held deep respect for House McLean's honor. But Logan, ever perceptive, pointed out the contradiction in her words. She had come to break the engagement without a valid reason, and now she wanted to speak of rationality? The hypocrisy was almost laughable. His mind drifted back to the past, to the events that had played out in his previous life. At the time, he had believed that Rena had been genuinely sad about their separation. But that was not the reality of what had happened. He remembered the moment she had called him to her room after the engagement was broken. She had spoken with warmth, saying that even if their betrothal was ending, she still wanted to create one last meaningful memory together. Logan, in his past life, had been a broken man. Cast out from his family, he had lost everything. The idea of running away with the woman he loved had seemed like salvation, a final escape from the cruel world that had abandoned him. In desperation, he had suggested that they flee together. But then, without warning, Rena had thrown a dagger at him. The blade had cut through the air, and only through sheer reflex had Logan managed to block it with his sword. His breath had caught in his throat as he stared at her in disbelief. And that was when her true colors had emerged. With a scornful laugh, she had mocked him. Had he truly thought himself worthy of her? A man like him? A failure? A disgrace? He should have known his place from the beginning. He had lost to a child. Her words had dripped with venom as she spat them at him. And because of that, things had become much easier for her. Logan, utterly confused and heartbroken, had barely been able to process what was happening. He had asked her what was going on, why she was doing this. Then, suddenly, she had screamed. Her guard had burst into the room within moments, immediately demanding to know what had happened. And Rena, feigning distress, had pointed at Logan and accused him. She had claimed that he had suddenly turned aggressive, that she had been defending herself from him. It had been a setup from the start. At the time, Logan had tried to defend himself, to explain that it was a lie. But his reputation had already been in ruins. His family had not believed him. Instead, they had been forced to pay a massive sum in compensation to House Wolves to make the problem disappear. Because of her, he had lost everything. Because of her, he had sworn never to trust another woman again. Now, standing here in the present, watching her put on her act, Logan knew she was planning something, and this time, he would not fall for it. Logan clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. In his past life, he had been played for a fool, cast aside like a piece of worthless trash, but this time, Rena wouldn't get away with it. He had returned with knowledge, experience, and the wisdom of his failures. He wasn't some naive young noble blinded by emotions. At first, he had believed that the best way to change his fate was to prove himself within the family, that by earning the recognition of his kin, he could influence them to rise above their weaknesses. However, his duel with Dominic had shown him the truth. Strength alone would not be enough. The soldiers had turned a blind eye when he was insulted, and rumors had spread like wildfire in his absence. Respect wasn't something he could win over time. It had to be forced into existence. He had wanted to transform the family, but recognition alone wouldn't be enough. And with only 9 months left until the regional war, his reputation no longer mattered. Logan made his decision. Without hesitation, he spoke clearly, and without doubt he would accept the 3 million gold. Rena's expression wavered for the first time, startled by his declaration. The patriarch's reaction was immediate, his voice filled with disapproval as he reprimanded Logan for daring to defy his will. The weight of his father's authority pressed down upon the room, but Logan didn't back down. His stance was firm. If honor could be compensated with mere words that disappeared into the air like whispers in the wind, then its value was as light as those words. A hollow apology meant nothing. The only thing of true value was action, and in this world, gold was the currency that spoke the loudest. Rena quickly tried to regain control of the situation, stating that House Wolves would abide by the patriarch's wishes and asked him for his final decision. Logan, observing her carefully, knew exactly what she was thinking. She spoke as though she were concerned about her father's dignity, but in reality, she likely feared having to part with such a significant sum. His father, ever the stern leader, acknowledged that as the patriarch of House McLean, he was satisfied with an apology. However, he left the final decision in Logan's hands, as the one directly involved in the matter. The tension in the room thickened. His stepmother grew apprehensive, as did many of the others present. His father gave him one final warning, cautioning that if Logan accepted money for dishonor, he would open a door that could never be closed. Future negotiations regarding his honor would become inevitable. Logan didn't hesitate. He accepted the 3 million gold. His stepmother, for once, was left speechless. Rena, too, seemed at a loss for words. His father, however, looked at him with evident disappointment. He had believed Logan had changed for the better, but now he saw that his son had changed for the worse. Perhaps, the patriarch mused aloud, this was his own failure for not teaching Logan the true value of honor. Though his father's words stung, Logan remained resolute. Deep inside, he felt sadness, but he knew this was the right choice. He wasn't doing this out of greed, he was doing this for the family. Later, within the confines of his room, Logan leaned back in his chair, finally allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. He had secured the 3 million gold. It was a massive amount, but he couldn't afford to get too comfortable just yet. That money needed to be stored in the bank for safekeeping. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Assuming it was Rick, Logan casually invited the visitor inside. However, instead of his loyal servant, the person who entered was none other than Dwayne, the patriarch's most trusted financial manager. Logan immediately sharpened his senses. He wasn't naive. Dwayne wasn't here for him. That much was clear from the older man's carefully crafted, almost overly polite smile. Inside Dwayne's mind, he regarded this moment as the greatest challenge of his career. For years, he had been managing the McLean family's estate with an ever-shrinking budget. The guards, butlers, and soldiers constantly complained about the lack of supplies, the dire need to replace weapons, and the general underfunding that plagued every corner of the household. He had spent years compensating for the lack of funds by seeking aid from the patriarch's relatives, practically begging at times. He wondered if he was a financial manager or merely the chief of beggars. If he were back in his hometown, he would have quit long ago. But now, an opportunity had fallen into his lap. With 3 million gold on the table, he could finally bring some stability to House McLean's finances. And his opponent in this negotiation? A young man who, until recently, had been nothing more than a reckless fool. However, Dwayne was cautious. He had anticipated that Logan might resist, but the kid actually thought he was going to keep all the money for himself. Out loud, Dwayne played his role well, offering a respectful greeting. He complimented Logan on his impressive stance earlier, remarking on how he had held his ground without flinching. His attitude and aura exuding the dignity of a true McLean heir. Inside, the financial manager was keenly observing Logan's reaction, curious to see how the young master would respond to his first genuine praise. Until now, Logan had been nothing more than a failure. This might have been the first time anyone had actually acknowledged him. Logan, however, was unimpressed. Without emotion, he directly asked what Dwayne was doing there. Then, without waiting for an answer, he followed up with a pointed remark. 3 million gold, in these difficult times, was like a sudden downpour during a drought. The intelligence shown by the protagonist has allowed the family to breathe a sigh of relief, Dwayne thought to himself. However, Logan's next words hit like a blade to the gut. Without a trace of emotion, Logan questioned why the family would be relieved at all. After all, the money was his. Dwayne had expected some resistance, but he hadn't expected Logan to be this direct. The kid seriously thought he could use the entire sum for himself. Still, Dwayne was experienced in handling difficult negotiations. Maintaining his composure, he asked Logan to be patient. He reminded him that he had been managing the family's finances for 20 years. His knowledge of the estate's economic struggles was unmatched. To reinforce his point, Dwayne painted a clear picture of their reality. He had spent years begging Logan's stepmother's family for financial support. It had become routine, a humiliating necessity that they had no choice but to endure. Without that support, they would have already fallen apart. Logan, playing along, asked if the family situation was really that dire. Seeing an opening, Dwayne seized the moment. He explained that the estate owed 3 million gold to Cooper Bank, a debt that loomed over them like an executioner's blade. And the annual interest on that debt? Before Dwayne could even finish his sentence, Logan completed it for him, 150,000 gold. A silent battle began between them. Dwayne, a seasoned financial manager, was determined to secure control over the funds. Logan, however, had returned from the future. He knew how this game was played, and he had no intention of losing. Logan, without hesitation, pointed out that the estate should be able to cover the interest payments for the year with the revenue from the harvest, but Dwayne, who had spent years struggling to balance the financial affairs of House McLean, quickly refuted the notion, explaining that simply managing the barony required an immense amount of resources and that, despite their best efforts, their budget had always been tight. forcing them to rely on outside assistance just to maintain the bare minimum of functionality. With a carefully measured tone, he asked if Logan, now seemingly invested in the well-being of the family, would be willing to contribute at least a portion of the newly acquired funds to help alleviate some of the more immediate financial pressures that plagued them. However, Logan, without a shred of hesitation, firmly declined, much to Dwayne's surprise, as the financial manager had assumed that the young master, who had so adamantly opposed the patriarch in front of everyone just to secure this sum, would have been more than willing to assist in maintaining the estate's daily operations. Yet, despite his refusal to comply with Dwayne's request, Logan clarified that his decision was not made out of selfishness or lack of concern for the family, but rather from a strategic perspective, as he had no intention of wasting such a substantial sum of money on temporary solutions that would only delay their inevitable financial collapse instead of preventing it altogether. With an unyielding gaze, Logan explained that the core issue with House McLean's financial crisis wasn't simply a matter of being in debt or struggling with a limited budget, but rather that they had no means of generating sustainable wealth, no valuable resources to trade, no industries to cultivate, and no products that would set them apart from other noble houses, leaving them trapped in an endless cycle of borrowing and repaying, only to find themselves in an even worse situation as the years went by. If they used the entirety of the $3 million gold simply to pay off the current debt and cover the household's expenses for the next few years, they would only be delaying the inevitable, and before long, they would fall into the same financial abyss once again, forced to beg for support from others without ever building a foundation of their own. Dwayne, who had always seen Logan as nothing more than an incompetent and disinterested noble who had never once taken an interest in the inner workings of the estate, found himself struggling to reconcile his previous assumptions with the young man standing before him, whose calm demeanor, sharp analysis, and unwavering conviction painted the image of someone who had not only taken the time to truly understand their situation, but also had the foresight to think beyond short-term solutions and towards something far greater. Despite his growing realization that Logan was no longer the naive young master he had once been, Dwayne still sought to push the matter further, insisting that Logan simply hand over the funds and leave the financial matters to those who had been managing them for years. Logan, unfazed by the man's persistence, posed a simple yet devastating question, asking what would truly change if they used the funds in the way Dwayne suggested, to which the financial manager predictably responded that it would allow them to have a larger budget, ease the burden of estate management for the next few years, and give them some much-needed breathing room to reorganize their affairs. However, Logan immediately followed up with yet another pointed question, asking what they would do after those few years had passed, to which Dwayne found himself unable to provide an answer, as the cycle they were trapped in had no real solution under the current system. Without any hesitation, Logan decisively stated that he had no interest in maintaining a broken system, and that, instead of throwing money at a temporary fix, he would use the $3 million gold to implement a plan that would provide House McLean with the financial independence it desperately needed to break free from the shackles of debt and reclaim its former glory. Dwayne, who had long believed that Logan had no genuine interest in family matters, found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about the young master, as it was now clear that Logan was not only thinking ahead, but was fully determined to reshape House McLean's future with his own hands. Realizing that further argument would be pointless, Dwayne sighed before asking Logan if he would be willing to help cover some of the immediate expenses, to which Logan, now seeing an opportunity to negotiate, stated that he would agree if Dwayne could fulfill a request of his. Intrigued, the financial manager asked what exactly Logan needed, and without hesitation, Logan informed him that he required a group of mercenaries. A short while later, Logan stood fully clad in armor, his expression calm and resolute as he made his final preparations to leave the castle. Rick, his ever-loyal butler, stood before him with an expression of growing concern, unable to comprehend why his master, after having just secured such an enormous sum of money, was now preparing to leave the safety of the estate on yet another unpredictable venture. When he hesitantly asked Logan if he was truly planning to leave, Logan confirmed without hesitation, stating that there was no other choice if he wanted to accomplish what needed to be done. Rick, still unable to understand, pointed out that Logan had already obtained a vast amount of gold, more than enough to turn the estate situation around, but Logan simply shook his head, knowing that $3 million gold, though a substantial amount, was nowhere near enough to achieve what he truly desired. The butler, growing increasingly frustrated, reminded him that the patriarch would never allow him to leave, especially given the current tensions within the castle. But Logan, having already foreseen this, simply dismissed the concern, stating that he had no intention of asking for permission he would leave secretly. In his mind, Logan fully acknowledged that, at the present moment, his reputation within the family was beyond repair, as the rumors surrounding him had only grown worse during his absence. And even though he had won his duel against Dominic, it was clear that the soldiers and knights still viewed him as a failure. Instead of wasting time trying to earn their respect, he would build power outside of the family first and return when he no longer needed their recognition to command authority. Having once lived as an exiled mercenary, Logan had first-hand experience of the outside world, knowledge that none of them possessed, and he would use that knowledge to his advantage. Rick, finally reaching the end of his patience, threw himself to the ground, declaring that if Logan wished to leave, he would have to step over him, to which Logan, ever the opportunist, jokingly lifted his foot and pretended to trample on his butler, before reassuring him that he would at least leave behind a letter for his father, ensuring that Rick wouldn't be blamed for his sudden disappearance. When Rick reluctantly asked what Logan intended to write, the young master simply gave a mischievous smirk. Later that night, in the Patriarch's office, Logan's father sat in silence as he read the letter left behind by his son, its contents deceptively simple yet frustratingly ambiguous. "I am deeply saddened by the broken engagement and have left the castle to clear my mind." Signed, Logan McLean. Rick, standing nearby, could only hope that his master would return safely. As Logan ventured beyond the castle walls, his thoughts drifted to the past, recalling the grand history of his family. 200 years ago, House McLean had been a dominant force, ruling vast lands that stretched from the county of Tess to the territories of Sylvan and Pina, presiding over the fertile Bayos Plains as the undisputed lords of southeastern Grandia. However, thanks to the failures of the last 3 generations, their once great legacy had been reduced to nothing. Their lands had been stripped away, their title diminished, their resources depleted, leaving them with nothing but the barren mountains to the south. Even if they emerged victorious in the upcoming regional war, the financial trap they were caught in would still persist, making true recovery impossible without a substantial influx of wealth. Fortunately, Logan knew exactly where to find it. His destination Kale, the largest city in the kingdom, and the man he sought, Philip Claw, the Gold Lover. The Ares Empire had long stood as a land where talent alone dictated success, where neither noble lineage nor inherited wealth determined one's future, but rather the strength of one's own ability to rise above the rest. In this empire, those who possessed skill, intelligence, and the will to succeed could climb to the highest ranks of power, attaining wealth and influence regardless of their age, gender, or background. Even those born outside of the empire, foreigners with no claim to citizenship, were given opportunities unheard of in other kingdoms, allowed to accumulate status and fortune if they proved themselves worthy. This policy, rooted in a strict meritocracy, had allowed figures like Philip Claw to flourish, a man whose name had become synonymous with both extreme wealth and ruthless business acumen. A merchant from the Kingdom of Grandia who had not only thrived within the empire but had also risen to become its largest war merchant. A figure whose influence stretched far beyond mere trade, shaping the course of battles and wars with the vast network of supplies and weaponry he controlled. Through careful investments, political maneuvering, and an uncanny ability to predict the tides of war, Philip had solidified his place as one of the most powerful economic forces on the continent, supplying armies, equipping mercenaries, and ensuring that wherever there was conflict, there was also profit to be made. Many in Grandia had long since turned against him, branding him a traitor who cared only for wealth, accusing him of strengthening foreign armies while his homeland suffered. Yet, in truth, Philip Claw had never abandoned his roots. Despite his reputation as the Gold Lover, a man whose obsession with riches knew no bounds, he had never once forsaken Grandia's interests. When the time came, when his homeland teetered on the brink of ruin, he would be the one to use his vast fortune and influence to orchestrate what would later be known as the miracle of Grandia's sovereign rule. However, the man once feared and respected as an economic titan now lay sprawled on the dirty streets, his fine clothing reduced to tattered rags, his usually polished shoes scuffed and worn, his face unshaven, and his once proud posture now reduced to the desperate slouch of a man abandoned by fortune. He muttered bitterly under his breath, cursing the people who had deceived him, lamenting the fact that he had allowed himself to fall into such a humiliating state. Gone were the luxurious estates, the vast trading fleets, and the powerful connections now. He had nothing but regret and anger, staring at the ground like a beggar who had lost all hope. He questioned how he would even survive from here on out, his voice filled with a mixture of frustration and disbelief as he struggled to come to terms with the cruel twist of fate that had left him in such a dire position. Logan, standing nearby, took in the sight with quiet amusement, watching as the once mighty merchant wallowed in his misery. Though he had already known of Philip's downfall, having learned of it in his past life, seeing it unfold in real time was an entirely different experience. He had never been able to witness this moment personally before, but now, standing here, He could see firsthand the raw emotion that accompanied the merchant's despair. The betrayal Philip had suffered had left him completely broken, his mind filled with doubt, his once unshakable confidence now shattered. But Logan knew that this was exactly what made Philip valuable. A man who had nothing left to lose was a man who could be molded, guided, and turned into an asset. Without hesitation, Logan approached, stepping forward with measured confidence as he addressed the fallen merchant by name. The moment his name was spoken, Philip Claw's body tensed slightly, his tired eyes narrowing as he slowly lifted his gaze to meet Logan's. There was a brief moment of hesitation before he confirmed his identity, his tone guarded, followed immediately by a question: who was this man? His words carried suspicion, as though he was already bracing himself for yet another misfortune. As soon as Philip got a proper look at Logan, his sharp instincts immediately kicked in, his merchant's eye quickly assessing the stranger before him. His first observation was the young man's striking red hair and piercing eyes, traits that were not commonly seen, coupled with an intense expression that suggested he was not here for something trivial. But what stood out the most to Philip wasn't Logan's posture, his appearance, or even his choice of armor. It was the look in his eyes. A look Philip had seen countless times before: greed. The raw, insatiable hunger for something greater, a fire that burned behind his gaze, the unmistakable ambition of a man who sought more than what he had. Though his body was weak from exhaustion and hunger, Philip's mind remained as sharp as ever, and his suspicions only deepened as he carefully examined Logan's appearance. He noted the old yet durable armor, the dirt clinging to his boots from extensive travel, and immediately made an assumption this young man was nothing more than a mercenary thug. But before Logan could speak, Philip, who had been deceived far too many times in recent days, suddenly panicked. His voice rose, his posture tensed, and in an instant he lashed out with an angry outburst, assuming that Logan was yet another debt collector here to take advantage of his misfortune. Before Logan could even introduce himself, Philip hastily declared that it was not payday yet, shouting that the money from his commercial property sale was still 3 days away and that Logan would have to come back then. The sheer absurdity of the moment caught Logan off guard for a brief second, but before he could respond, Philip continued, his tone becoming more frantic as he insisted that he had not received the payment yet, that he had no money to give, and that if Logan wanted anything from him, he would just have to wait. The exhaustion in his voice was clear, the weariness of a man who had been backed into a corner and had no strength left to fight back. When he finally ran out of things to say, Philip slumped, looking utterly defeated, as though even yelling had taken too much energy from him. Logan, however, merely looked at him with a mixture of mild disdain and amusement, before calmly clarifying that he had not come to collect money but to invest. Philip's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Of all the things he had expected to hear, that was the last. He was so caught off guard that for a moment he simply stared at Logan as if he had gone insane. Someone was actually saying they wanted to invest in him? A man whose business had just collapsed? Philip could only assume that Logan had completely lost his mind. No rational person would ever willingly throw their money into a business that had just failed, let alone one that had been sabotaged. But then, a dangerous thought entered Philip's mind. What if he's serious? His merchant's instincts, honed over years of negotiations and high-stakes dealings, made him pause. His curiosity now piqued. Philip hesitantly asked how much Logan intended to invest, to which Logan simply responded with another question: how much do you need? And then, as if it were the simplest thing in the world, he stated that he would cover Philip's debts and ensure he made a profit. Philip's sharp gaze immediately darted to Logan's belongings, his instincts kicking in once again. He noticed the dirt on Logan's armor, the signs of long travel, and then his eyes landed on something unmistakable, the crest of House McLean. The moment he recognized it, Philip's demeanor changed entirely. His suspicion deepened, and suddenly, he pointed an accusing finger at Logan, his voice dripping with skepticism. He scoffed at the very idea of Logan making any kind of investment, mockingly stating that if Logan had truly intended to deceive him, he should have prepared better, not realizing that his usual tricks wouldn't work on someone like Philip Claw. He laughed coldly as he remarked that the insignia Logan bore belonged to House McLean, a house notorious for being beggars, a noble family that had to rely on the support of others to survive, a family that had no wealth to speak of. He found the notion of a McLean noble investing in anything utterly laughable. However, Logan remained completely unfazed. Instead of arguing, he simply smirked and acknowledged Philip's keen sense of judgment. Then, without another word, Logan reached into his bag and pulled out a massive pile of gold coins, the unmistakable gleam of wealth shining in the dim light. Philip's breath hitched, his eyes widened in sheer shock, and in that moment, the man who had cursed his fate, who had wallowed in self-pity just moments ago, felt as though he was staring at a divine angel descending from the heavens. Moments later, Philip signed the contract in his own blood. Philip, despite having signed the contract with his own blood, still couldn't believe the absurdity of the situation. In all his years as a merchant, he had never been part of such a chaotic and hastily arranged deal, one that lacked any clear conditions or outlined expectations. However, given his current circumstances, he had no choice but to trust Logan, a young noble from a so-called beggar family who had not only appeared out of nowhere, but had also thrown a fortune at him with the ease of a man who had already mapped out his path to success. The protagonist, ever composed, extended his hand toward Philip, suggesting that from this point onward, they should work well together. Philip, still skeptical yet unable to refuse, hesitated for a moment before taking the offered hand, officially sealing their partnership. Still, unable to contain his curiosity, he asked what Logan intended to do first with his newfound investment, and when the young noble replied that his priority was to buy monster meat, Philip's mind nearly collapsed from the sheer absurdity of the statement. His disbelief was so profound that even the imaginary thought bubbles in his mind flipped upside down, as if his entire understanding of the world had been turned on its head. Logan, fully aware of the reaction his words had caused, couldn't blame Philip for his shock. After all, monster meat and blood were commonly regarded as dangerous and were typically destroyed as soon as possible due to the poison they contained. Burning them was the standard practice in nearly every city, town, and outpost. No one in their right mind would consider purchasing it, let alone investing $1 million gold in acquiring it. However, what Philip and the rest of the world didn't yet realize was that in just a few years, a groundbreaking discovery would change everything. A group of scholars and alchemists would eventually find a way to neutralize the poison within monster meat using simple, easily accessible ingredients, turning what was once a dangerous byproduct of battle into a highly valuable commodity. More importantly, once the general population began consuming the meat, an unexpected effect was discovered: enhanced virility. The meat of a particular species, the Kyoke monster, had an effect so potent that it rivaled and eventually surpassed any known aphrodisiac or male enhancement potion in existence. Stories spread of men who had previously suffered from physical ailments, injuries, or irreversible dysfunction suddenly regaining full use of their most treasured attributes. The transformation was undeniable, and as soon as the prestigious Magic Tower validated the effects through formal research, the demand for Kyoke monster meat skyrocketed to the point where the species itself became extinct. Every last one of them had been hunted down and consumed, vanishing entirely from the continent due to their newfound value. With this knowledge from his past life, Logan knew that his 3 million gold investment could be turned into more than 100 million in a matter of months, a level of profit that could change the fate of his entire house. Meanwhile, Philip, still reeling from the absurdity of the idea, found himself wondering if it was too late to run away from this reckless young noble who had somehow managed to rope him into this mess. As if to test Philip's limits even further, Logan casually declared that he would be spending 1 million gold on monster meat alone. The background characters surrounding them, eavesdropping on their conversation, nearly choked from shock. Philip, forced to process this, finally gathered his composure and began discussing the logistics, pointing out that transportation costs for such an absurdly large shipment would be an issue that needed to be addressed. First, Logan, however, had already thought ahead. Instead of relying on conventional means, he planned to hire the entire mercenary guild to hunt down and transport the monsters, ensuring both efficiency and security. Philip, while acknowledging that the method had its merits, suggested a far more efficient approach. Rather than hiring mercenaries directly, they should negotiate with the Merchants Guild. The guild, driven solely by profit, had no moral concerns about what they bought or sold, and if properly compensated, they could supply every Kyoke monster available in the kingdom at a fraction of the cost. This method would be faster, cheaper, and far more effective than sending out individual hunting parties. Logan, impressed by the suggestion, smirked and called Philip an amazing kid, admitting that even he hadn't considered such an approach. Philip, still adjusting to his role in this strange arrangement, took the compliment in stride and confidently declared that from this point on, Logan should leave all money-related concerns to him. The protagonist, pleased with the efficiency of their partnership, made one final request. He handed Philip a note and instructed him to begin acquiring a specific list of materials in large quantities. As Philip scanned the note, his expression grew curious, noting that the items listed included cartridges, specialized steel, and reinforced blades. Logan, sensing his growing suspicion, explained that he couldn't outright mention military-grade materials, as such things were heavily regulated, but the components listed were all essential for crafting a new type of weapon. He elaborated that in his past life, These very weapons had been used during the Ares Empire's invasion, proving their effectiveness in warfare. Unlike conventional weapons, these were designed to allow ordinary soldiers to take down knights, leveling the battlefield in ways that traditional arms never could. Before departing, Logan had already entrusted Dwayne with hiring a band of mercenaries, and he knew that simply arming them with standard weapons wouldn't be enough. If he was going to create a force capable of winning territorial battles, he needed not only advanced weaponry but also skilled instructors who could train these soldiers in their proper use. However, before he could finalize his plans, he had to find the right people for the job. 2 days later, in the mercenary city of Quran, Logan stood before a rugged and battle-worn man named Kaisan, an A-class mercenary known for his extensive combat experience. Logan, without hesitation, offered him a job not as a mercenary, but as an instructor. Kaisan, however, immediately pushed back, stating that he had never trained anyone in any significant capacity. Logan, unfazed, clarified that the task wouldn't be difficult, as he simply needed Kaisan to oversee the training of the C-class mercenaries that he was hiring. The older man, clearly skeptical, raised an eyebrow and asked where Logan had even heard that he was qualified for such a task, emphasizing that the most he had ever done was teach a few basic moves to kids. He suggested that Logan seek out a specialist instead, someone with formal training experience. Internally, Logan smirked. In his past life, he and Kaisan had worked together for years. What Kaisan didn't realize was that he was far more than just an ordinary mercenary. He was a man who had mastered every form of combat, from swordplay to archery, even excelling in cavalry tactics. However, his true value only became apparent after he retired due to severe injuries, because it was then that he became an instructor. And the mercenary battalion he trained went on to become one of the most elite fighting forces in the entire kingdom. Right now, Kaisan was completely unaware of his own hidden talent, but Logan had no intention of letting him walk away from this opportunity. Sensing Kaisan's reluctance, Logan took a different approach. He raised the price. He offered a staggering 4,000 gold per month, an amount nearly double what an A-class mercenary would normally earn. Kaisan, taken aback, shook his head and argued that a mercenary of his rank usually received a maximum salary of 2,000 gold per month, making Logan's offer absurdly excessive. However, Logan insisted, making it clear that he was willing to pay double if it meant securing Kaisan's expertise. Even so, the mercenary refused, stating firmly that he had never been an instructor and had no intention of taking on such a role. Logan didn't stop there. Without missing a beat, he increased the offer again, 6,000 gold per month. Kaisan, now genuinely considering the offer, hesitated, but ultimately shook his head, stating that if money were the only factor, he would rather take on combat missions than settle for a training job. Logan, still unfazed, smirked as he raised the offer once more, 7,000 gold per month. Kaisan, now visibly furious, clenched his fist and struck the nearby wall with enough force to leave a deep crack in the stone. His patience had finally run out. He demanded to know if Logan had truly heard anything he had just said, or if the young noble was simply deaf to anything that didn't involve throwing money at a problem. His voice carried the frustration of a man who had spent years surviving by sheer grit rather than wealth, and the idea that Logan thought money alone could dictate everything was enough to infuriate him beyond reason. However, before his anger could escalate any further, Logan, ever composed, spoke again. His offer now increased to 8,000 gold per month. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. Kaisan, who had been standing rigidly with barely contained fury, exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. A look of resignation settled on his face, the kind that only came when a man realized he had lost a battle he didn't even know he was fighting. With an exasperated sigh, he finally relented, accepting the offer with the grace of a man who knew when to stop resisting the inevitable. And just like that, the deal was sealed. With business out of the way, their conversation took on a more casual tone, shifting from negotiations to personal matters. Kaisan, still adjusting to the fact that he was now in the employment of a noble, asked Logan if he was really from House McLean, to which Logan gave a short, affirmative response. The veteran mercenary, still skeptical about the young noble's ambitions, then inquired if Logan was planning on hiring mercenaries for some secretive operation in a remote location. Logan, offering little in the way of concrete answers, confirmed that he had some plans in motion. Kaisan, who had seen enough battles and shady dealings in his lifetime to know that details were often left unsaid for a reason, simply shrugged and replied that as long as he was being paid well, he had no reason to care about the specifics. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a distant voice, someone shouting for people to move quickly. As they turned toward the commotion, Logan's gaze fell upon a long chain of slaves being herded through the street, their wrists and ankles bound with thick iron shackles. The sight was neither uncommon nor surprising. This was Harem, a city infamous for both mercenaries and the slave trade. Kaison, unfazed by the scene before them, casually remarked that Logan probably already knew that this area was notorious for slavery, and that if he continued traveling deeper into the district, he would see even more disturbing sights. From this point forward, the streets would be lined with slave markets, each filled with people reduced to nothing more than currency to be bought and sold. Logan, who had known about this beforehand, still found himself grimacing slightly at the reality of it all. He acknowledged that he had prepared himself for such a sight, but witnessing it firsthand was different from simply knowing about it. It didn't take long before merchants and traders started aggressively vying for Logan's attention, each one hoping to sell him their most prized stock. However, with just a single look from Kaison, a hardened mercenary, whose mere presence radiated the kind of violence that most men wisely avoided, the overeager traders quickly silenced themselves, shrinking back as if a wild beast had snarled at them. As Logan scanned the area, his attention was drawn toward a particular tent, one that had noticeably more guards stationed around it than the others. The increased security suggested that something valuable was housed inside, something far more important than the usual merchandise being peddled in the open. Intrigued, Logan moved toward it, only to be approached by an old man who studied him with sharp, calculating eyes. The merchant asked if Logan was aware of where he had wandered into, his tone suggesting that he was testing the young noble's knowledge. Without hesitation, Logan confirmed that he knew exactly where he was and stated his purpose: he wanted to buy a dwarf. The old merchant, intrigued by Logan's straightforwardness, gestured for him to follow and led him inside the tent. As they stepped in, Logan's eyes swept across the room, quickly taking in the state of the captives held within. Among them were elves, their eyes sunken and filled with hopelessness, their delicate features marred by filth and exhaustion. It was evident that they had endured harsh conditions, and their futures, unless purchased by a merciful buyer, were grim at best. The merchant, sensing Logan's interest, boasted that it had taken great effort to acquire such high-quality elf women, hinting that they were among his most valuable stock. He then asked Logan if he had ever encountered an elf before, his tone laced with the expectation that a noble would be interested in such an exotic purchase. However, before the man could continue his sales pitch, Logan's focus remained unchanged. Without sparing the elves another glance, he simply pointed at the dwarf he had come for. The dwarf, in stark contrast to the others, appeared to be in far better condition. He was well fed, his posture showed no signs of broken will, and despite the situation, his eyes burned with a stubborn defiance that suggested he had not yet been crushed by captivity. The merchant, upon realizing Logan's choice, nodded and explained that dwarves were highly versatile slaves, capable of being used for a variety of tasks. However, this particular dwarf was far more valuable than an ordinary worker. He was a craftsman, one of the rare few among the dwarven race who had dedicated their entire lives to the art of creation. Unlike common laborers, craftsmen were trained from childhood to perfect their craft, spending their entire existence improving and refining their skills until they reached a level of expertise unmatched by any other race. This dwarf in particular was one of the best among them. Logan, knowing exactly how useful the dwarf would be for his future plans, wasted no time in asking for the price. The merchant, sensing that he had a serious buyer, set the price at 250,000 gold, but, in an act of generosity, offered Logan a discount, reducing it to 200,000 gold. Without changing his expression, Logan calmly asked the merchant if he thought he was an idiot. The old man blinked, momentarily confused. Minutes later, the deal was settled, and Logan had successfully secured the dwarf for only 50,000 gold, a full 150,000 less than the original asking price. The dwarf, now standing beside his new master, shook his head and muttered that humans were truly the greediest creatures. Logan, smirking, merely responded that greed was the foundation of commerce. The old dwarf, amused by the answer, asked where Logan intended to take him. Without hesitation, Logan stated that he would be taking him to the southeastern region of McLean, where he would prepare the materials necessary for his upcoming endeavors. The dwarf, however, seemed unimpressed, asking if that was all there was to it. Logan, knowing how to motivate his new companion, casually added that if the dwarf worked diligently for the next 20 years, he would personally see to it that he was returned to the mountains where he truly belonged. Given that dwarves live far longer than humans, 20 years was nothing to them. The dwarf, upon hearing this, broke into a rare, genuinely happy smile. He nodded and, with an almost childlike enthusiasm, stated that he looked forward to the day he could return home. Before their conversation could continue, a sudden commotion erupted nearby. Logan turned just in time to see a young boy sprinting through the marketplace, desperately carrying an injured elf in his arms. A blond man, one of the slave traders, sneered and swiftly intercepted them, delivering a brutal kick that sent both the boy and the elf crashing to the ground. An enraged old man, his arm bleeding profusely, shouted in fury, calling the escapees scoundrels and demanding to know how they dared to attempt such a foolish escape. The elf girl, pinned beneath her brother, wept as she begged him to run to save himself. Kaison, ever pragmatic, sighed and stated that they were just slaves and that there was no need for Logan to concern himself with the matter. He advised that they should simply continue their journey, but Logan wasn't listening. His eyes locked onto the boy, and in that moment, his mind flooded with memories from his past life. The boy before him, with his mismatched red and blue eyes, his slightly pointed ears, and his striking blue hair, was none other than Victor, the future noble killer. The bald man, who had been preparing to strike the young boy once more, suddenly froze when his gaze fell upon the emblem emblazoned on Logan's armor, the unmistakable crest of House McLean. His entire demeanor shifted in an instant, and though he initially radiated the arrogance of a man in control, he now found himself stepping back ever so slightly, as if instinctively recognizing that he had unwittingly attempted to exert authority over the wrong person. With an awkward smile, he quickly adjusted his tone, offering a feigned politeness as he referred to Logan as a guest who had appeared at an inopportune time, explaining that he had merely been disciplining his slaves because they had failed to follow instructions. Logan, however, had no interest in entertaining the slavers' weak justifications. His mind was already made up. Without any hesitation, he stated his intent: he would buy the two slaves. He then asked for their price, his voice calm yet carrying an unspoken weight that demanded a response. The bald man, though still nervous, quickly recovered, attempting to regain his footing in the negotiation by setting an absurd price: 10,000 gold. Logan, hearing this, immediately recognized the blatant attempt at extortion. A young slave, even one in good condition, would typically be priced at around 300 gold. Yet this merchant, this greedy old scoundrel, was attempting to demand dozens of times that amount for two malnourished, weak, and visibly mistreated children. However, what made the situation truly ironic was that, unbeknownst to the slaver, one of these children, Victor, held a value far beyond anything he could possibly comprehend. In the future, Victor would be worth at least 100,000 gold, not as a commodity, but as one of the most dangerous individuals in the kingdom. The slaver, however, remained oblivious to the significance of the boy he was trying to overcharge for, giving Logan the perfect opportunity to turn the negotiation in his favor. Without missing a beat, Logan leaned in slightly, his sharp gaze locking onto the bald man's beady eyes as he coolly remarked that the mortality rate for child slaves in poor condition was over 30%. And judging by the state of these two, one of them looked as though they might not even survive the next few days. His words, though spoken in a measured tone, carried an undeniable authority that immediately put the slaver on edge. The bald man, sensing that Logan was not the type to be easily manipulated, scrambled for an alternative angle. He attempted to deceive Logan by falsely claiming that these were the only slaves for sale at the moment, as if to imply that Logan had no choice but to pay his inflated price. However, Logan, who had already anticipated such underhanded tactics, showed no outward reaction beyond mild disinterest. Instead, he simply countered with an offer of 500 gold, his voice unwavering, as if daring the slaver to continue this game any longer. The bald man, now sweating slightly, continued to insist that the slaves were worth far more, talking in circles in an attempt to justify his outrageous pricing. But Logan had had enough. His expression darkened ever so slightly, and in an instant, he released a sliver of his aura, a suffocating, oppressive force that filled the space between them, sending an unspoken warning that the slaver had mere seconds to comply or face consequences beyond mere financial loss. The change in atmosphere was immediate. The bald man stiffened, his breath hitching as the fear sank deep into his bones. He knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he had just been backed into a corner by someone he had no business trying to deceive. With no other choice, he reluctantly agreed to sell the two slaves for 1,000 gold coins, cutting his original asking price by 90% in a desperate attempt to escape Logan's suffocating presence. Kaison, ever the pragmatic mercenary, stepped forward without complaint and effortlessly lifted the injured boy onto his back while the girl walked closely beside them, her eyes never leaving her brother. Within moments, the boy stirred, waking far quicker than anyone had anticipated, his injuries seemingly healing at an unnatural rate. Logan observed the scene with concealed curiosity, quietly noting that Victor's ability to recover so rapidly was indeed impressive. However, what no one else could see was the truth behind the boy's miraculous recovery. Logan himself had been transferring a portion of his own life force into Victor, a technique far more effective than low-level holy magic, capable of accelerating healing beyond natural limits. However, what was truly astonishing was not the effectiveness of Logan's ability, but the fact that, despite his young age, the girl walking beside them, Victor's sister, had noticed it. While Kaisan, an experienced mercenary with a keen sense for magic, had failed to detect the energy transfer, this young girl had sensed it immediately. Logan, though outwardly composed, made a mental note of this. She was no ordinary child. Just as Logan was piecing together this realization, Victor, rather than showing gratitude, suddenly sprang into action. With surprising speed, the boy lunged at Logan, his small hands reaching for the young noble's throat as he shouted for him to die. Logan, completely unbothered, effortlessly dodged, sidestepping the attack before swiftly grabbing Victor's wrist and twisting it behind his back, his other hand pressing against the boy's neck, holding him in place with minimal effort. There was no hesitation, no unnecessary movement, just pure, calculated control. As Victor struggled, Logan leaned in slightly, his voice as cold as steel as he asked whether the boy was brave or simply foolish. He calmly remarked that, unlike the slaver who had just been bested in a mere conversation, he was not someone Victor could afford to pick a fight with. Though he appreciated that the boy had a fighting spirit, he warned that such a trait was only valuable when paired with wisdom. If Victor was determined to challenge him, then he had to be prepared for the consequences. However, Logan was willing to offer him a choice. After letting go of the boy and kneeling to meet him at eye level, Logan stated that he intended to train Victor as a knight. The words alone were enough to give Victor pause. Logan, seeing the flicker of doubt in the boy's expression, elaborated further. If Victor became a knight, he would attain an almost noble status, one that would naturally free him from slavery. Not only he would be free, but his sister as well. Victor, who had lived every moment of his life struggling to protect his sister, who had endured humiliation and suffering for the sole purpose of ensuring her well-being, found himself staring at the possibility of changing their fate entirely. For the first time, there was a way out. He turned to his sister, the only person who had ever mattered to him, and saw the quiet hope in her expression. His hesitation faded, and with newfound determination, he turned back to Logan and shouted his acceptance. Logan, internally satisfied, recognized that Victor's attachment to his sister would be the key to controlling his otherwise destructive nature. As long as she remained a priority to him, Victor's loyalty could be secured. With Victor's future now decided, Logan turned to the dwarf, Hamar, for a private conversation. In a separate setting, Logan presented the magical contract he had prepared, one nearly identical to the lifelong contract Philip had signed. However, unlike Philip's agreement, this contract had a defined term. After 20 years of service, Hamar would be returned to his people in the mountains. As Hamar read the contract, his expression changed from wary skepticism to sheer elation. His hands trembled as he realized the significance of what he was holding. Unlike ordinary slave contracts, this one guaranteed his freedom. Without hesitation, he signed it, his joy evident. Logan observed the moment with quiet satisfaction, realizing just how powerful one simple contract could be in revitalizing a man's spirit. His objectives were progressing smoothly, and the preparations for the territorial war were well underway. However, what Logan failed to anticipate was the rumors that had begun to spread throughout the city in his absence. Unbeknownst to him, his name had become the center of controversy, and his reputation had plummeted to an all-time low. Back at the McLean estate, his servant Rick had suffered countless hardships, enduring endless scrutiny and torment in his desperate attempts to prevent the rumors from spiraling further. When Logan finally returned, Rick greeted him not with relief, but with barely restrained exasperation, demanding to know if his young master had any idea what kind of nonsense had been circulating in his absence. Apparently, Logan had earned a new title among the people. The legendary monster lover of House McLean, the fool who spent over 150,000 gold on monster meat, and at the root of it all, Philip Claw had started the rumors. Philip had always been a shrewd businessman, and his plan to capture the attention of the merchants had been well thought out. But what he failed to account for was the simple fact that Logan's reputation was already terrible. The noble circles and common folk alike had already branded him with several unflattering titles: Prince Logan, the discarded fiancé, the man whose engagement had been cancelled in disgrace, the noble who blackmailed his own betrothed for money. And now, thanks to Philip's actions, he had gained yet another notorious title: the legendary monster lover of House McLean, the fool who spent over 150,000 gold on monster meat. It was a reputation that would have humiliated any ordinary noble, Yet Philip, completely unbothered, stood before a gathered crowd and shouted the price at 1 gold piece per kilo. His voice filled with excitement as he turned the supposed scandal into a grand economic opportunity. With the sharp instincts of a master merchant, he flipped the narrative entirely, asking the gathered merchants what kind of fool would refuse to turn something worthless into profit. Who in their right mind would ignore the chance to turn trash into gold? As the idea sank into their minds, the merchants, who had initially been skeptical of the rumors, began to realize the potential of the opportunity before them. One by one, their greed took over, and soon they were scrambling to gather as many monster carcasses as they could find. And just like that, what had begun as an insult to Logan's name had become a frenzy of profit-seeking merchants, all eager to get their share of what was suddenly being treated as valuable commodities. That was how the rumors had truly started. Logan, far from being irritated by this development, simply laughed, commending Philip for his sheer brilliance in handling the situation. The merchant had managed to twist an otherwise damaging scandal into something that worked in their favor, all while securing the interest of the marketplace. However, while Logan found amusement in it, Rick, his ever-loyal but suffering servant, was horrified. With an exasperated expression, Rick demanded to know if this was really the time to be laughing, then pointed toward the troubled expressions of their allies, urging Logan to pay attention to the murmurs spreading among the locals. It was not a peaceful moment, on the contrary. Things had become increasingly tense, and at the heart of that tension was none other than the patriarch himself. The Lord of House McLean was, by all accounts, furious. Inside the patriarch's chambers, the atmosphere was thick with restrained anger as Logan stood before his father, who had clearly been waiting to interrogate him. The patriarch, his expression unreadable yet heavy with authority, wasted no time in asking the question that had been on his mind since the rumors first reached his ears. Had Logan used this as an opportunity to run away from home? Logan, unfazed by the accusation, merely shrugged and corrected him, stating that it wasn't running away but more of a brief trip. His father, unconvinced, narrowed his eyes and stated that, based on what he had heard, Logan had seemed quite excited while engaging in reckless behavior, and if nothing else, it looked as though he had enjoyed himself. Logan, maintaining his calm demeanor, simply responded that rumors were just rumors, and he felt no shame for the decisions he had made. His words, though spoken lightly, carried the weight of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. However, not everyone in the room was willing to let the matter drop so easily. Logan's stepmother, ever the voice of disapproval, turned toward the patriarch with an expression of barely contained frustration, stating that it was clear that Logan had no awareness of his own situation. If things continued as they were, she warned, the entire family's reputation would suffer greatly. But before she could continue her lecture, Logan interjected, his voice carrying a cold amusement as he told her she was overreacting. He then casually reminded everyone present that the wedding money had been his to do with as he pleased, implying that if anyone had a problem with how he spent it, that was their issue, not his. His stepmother, now visibly angered by his dismissive attitude, turned to the patriarch once more, demanding to know if he would truly allow Logan to behave this way without consequence. Before the tension could escalate any further, the patriarch's voice cut through the room like a blade, commanding everyone to be silent. His tone brooked no argument, and even Logan's stepmother, despite her frustration, immediately fell quiet. For a long moment, silence hung between father and son before the patriarch, now speaking more calmly, asked Logan what was really going on. He wanted a direct answer. Why was his son engaging in such reckless, chaotic actions? Why was he suddenly spending obscene amounts of money and making outrageous business deals? Speaking as a father, he wanted to understand what was driving Logan to do these things. Logan, however, merely smiled faintly and told his father that even if he explained, the patriarch wouldn't understand. His father, though not entirely satisfied with that response, acknowledged that he had never doubted Logan's intelligence. However, he had heard too many unsettling things about his son as of late. Rumors painted Logan as a violent, cruel, and money-obsessed lunatic, with some even whispering that he had completely lost his mind. The patriarch, looking Logan in the eye, asked him one final question. How long should he continue protecting him? If there was a deadline for how much patience a father should have for his son, he wanted Logan to state it now. For the first time in a long while, Logan was caught off guard, not by the accusation, not by the doubts, but by the mention of his mother. His father had never spoken of her before, yet now, there was an unmistakable implication he had never stopped searching for her. The knowledge that the patriarch hadn't given up hope on his missing wife struck Logan in a way he hadn't expected. It changed everything. Instead of responding with his usual bravado, Logan's expression became serious. He met his father's gaze and, in a rare moment of vulnerability, asked for 1 year. Just 1 year to prove himself, to clarify his actions. he pleaded for his father to wait until then. After Logan left, the patriarch remained alone in his chambers, silently contemplating his son's words. He had never imagined that such a request would come from Logan's mouth, and now he found himself wondering, could his son truly achieve something within a year? If Logan failed to prove himself, then as the Lord of House McLean, he would be forced to make a harsh decision. Before being a father, he was a leader, and as much as he wanted to protect his son, he knew that at the end of the day, duty always came first. Holding an old, faded portrait of Logan's mother in his hands, he muttered an apology, admitting that despite all his efforts, he still had no idea what Logan was truly thinking. Meanwhile, Logan, despite the weight of the conversation with his father, found himself faced with another unexpected development. His younger brother, Ronian, had awakened his core. Ronian, ever the prodigy, excitedly explained that it had been difficult, but in the end, he had managed to achieve it. Logan, who had never expected his younger brother to reach this milestone so early, felt a flicker of genuine surprise. In his past life, Ronian had only awakened his core during the regional battle, so for him to reach this level now was completely unprecedented. But what was even more shocking was why Ronian had done it. He had forced himself to awaken his core just to find Logan, and in doing so, had defeated the knights who had tried to stop him. Logan, realizing just how different the timeline had become, smirked. If Ronian's power continued to develop at this rate, then once he taught him the celestial sword technique, his younger brother could very well become even stronger than he had been in their past life. As for Logan's own plans, they were about to face a major test. At a mercenary outpost in southern McLean, Logan arrived to find 350 Celsius-class mercenaries, all gathered in one place. However, rather than being impressed, they were arguing among themselves, wondering if they had been deceived. Some doubted that a mere baron could afford to hire an entire mercenary guild, while others sneered, repeating the terrible rumors about Logan. One particularly bold mercenary, a bald man, laughed mockingly, going as far as to claim that Logan was nothing more than a fraud, just a noble brat playing soldier in fancy armor. Logan's expression darkened. This wasn't going to end with words. The bald mercenary, who had been laughing mockingly at Logan just moments ago, suddenly felt the weight of a piercing gaze settle upon him. Logan, standing calmly amidst the murmuring crowd, had singled him out with a sharpness that cut through the noise of the gathered mercenaries. With a knowing smirk, Logan repeated the very joke the bald man had made earlier, causing him to flinch slightly, his amusement momentarily replaced by confusion. How had Logan heard him from that distance? The sheer accuracy with which the young noble parroted his words was unsettling, and for the first time, the bald man felt a strange unease creeping into his mind. Logan, his tone laced with an almost taunting curiosity, commented that if the bald man could judge others so freely, then it must mean that he possessed a superior skill himself. With feigned sincerity, Logan then questioned what kind of C-class mercenary could afford to ignore the potential strength of others, subtly turning the insult back. As he continued speaking, Logan observed that the bald man clearly held some degree of pride, despite his earlier mockery, which gave him the perfect leverage to escalate the situation. He then made a bold proposal. If the bald mercenary could land even a single blow on him, Logan would pay him an entire year's worth of supplies, with the gathered mercenaries serving as witnesses to ensure the wager was upheld. The proposition immediately sparked interest among the crowd, with many now viewing this as a spectacle worth watching, their murmurs growing louder as they speculated on whether the bold young noble was truly confident in his abilities or simply out of his depth. The bald man, his pride now challenged in front of so many people, scoffed and accepted the wager without hesitation, convinced that this noble brat had just made the worst mistake of his life. Without a hint of fear, the large mercenary squared up, towering over Logan with his sheer size and presence. His confidence was evident as he cracked his knuckles, rolling his shoulders in preparation for what he assumed would be an easy victory. Many among the crowd whispered among themselves, questioning if the bald man was actually closer to B-class in strength, given his sheer size and endurance. Despite the growing anticipation, the bald mercenary, still arrogant, smugly offered Logan the first attack, dismissively waving a hand as if to suggest that no punch could possibly hurt him. Logan, expressionless, asked if he was sure, receiving an impatient nod in return. And then, in a single instant, before anyone could process what had happened, Logan's fist shot forward like a lightning bolt, connecting directly with the bald man's mouth. The impact was devastating. The sheer force of the strike sent shockwaves through the man's skull, his entire body recoiling as if he had been struck by a war hammer. The once proud mercenary collapsed immediately, crashing onto the ground in an undignified heap, his breath leaving him in a single stunned exhale. Silence engulfed the training grounds as every mercenary present stood frozen, their disbelief etched onto their faces. One punch, that was all it had taken. Logan, barely even breaking a sweat, stretched his arms casually before glancing down at his fallen opponent, his expression unreadable. Then, with a voice that carried effortlessly through the hushed atmosphere, he asked the gathered mercenaries a simple question: who's next? The confidence, the absolute control he exuded, sent shivers down the spines of those watching. Even Kaisan, a seasoned warrior who had already known that Logan was unusual, found himself reevaluating just how unusual the young noble truly was. At such a young age, Logan not only possessed a core, but his sheer strength and speed were already on par with seasoned fighters. Logan took the opportunity to formally introduce himself to the mercenaries, stating his name and addressing the curiosity that had undoubtedly been lingering in their minds. Why had he gathered so many mercenaries? He wasted no time explaining that his goal was to train them, transforming them into a cavalry unit specializing in crossbow warfare. His words immediately sparked a new wave of murmurs, with several mercenaries exchanging skeptical glances. Crossbows? On horseback? Some voiced their doubts outright, questioning whether such a thing had ever even been attempted before, as crossbows typically required time to reload, making them inefficient for fast-paced cavalry maneuvers. Others pointed out that reloading a crossbow while riding would be incredibly difficult, if not outright impossible. Even Kaisan, despite his earlier amazement at Logan's abilities, felt the need to warn him that crossbows were not well suited for cavalry combat, emphasizing their limitations. Logan, however, remained undeterred. He acknowledged the flaws that had been pointed out, demonstrating that he understood the concerns, but he then proceeded to dismantle them one by one. He explained that crossbows undeniably had more firepower than traditional bows, making them deadlier in battle. However, the biggest drawback was reloading speed. It typically took a full minute for an inexperienced soldier to reload a crossbow, as they had to brace it against a counterweight. On horseback, such a process would be even more cumbersome, making conventional crossbow use completely impractical. However, Logan had no intention of using crossbows in the traditional way. He proposed a radical solution. If reloading was the issue, then rather than reloading, soldiers should simply carry multiple pre-loaded crossbows, allowing them to fire continuously before discarding the empty weapons. While this strategy had its limits, it ensured that the initial barrage of firepower would be overwhelming. Even if the idea seemed reckless to some, Logan was confident in its potential. He then turned to Kaisan, instructing him to train the mercenaries thoroughly, emphasizing that once properly implemented, this crossbow cavalry would provide a massive tactical advantage in the upcoming territorial war, positioning House McLean as a dominant force on the battlefield. A few days later, Logan reviewed a qualification letter, noting that out of the 350 mercenaries recruited, 312 had successfully passed the initial tests. While not perfect, the result was still decent, marking a significant step forward in his plans. Meanwhile, Hamar, the dwarven craftsman, approached Logan with curiosity, asking about the project he had been assigned to work on. Logan wasted no time in explaining it was the crossbow project, an innovation that would completely change the way these weapons were used. He confidently stated that this particular crossbow design was a weapon he had personally used for decades in his past life, and he had reconstructed its blueprint entirely from memory. Hamar, despite being an experienced craftsman, initially found the idea questionable. As he examined the details, he began listing the core features, noting that Logan's proposed design included a cartridge attached to the back to store bolts and reload automatically. Furthermore, the weapon would be capable of firing 3 bolts at once, a concept that, at first glance, seemed utterly absurd. Hamar scoffed, questioning who in their right mind would come up with such a ridiculous concept. Without hesitation, Logan simply stated he did. Hamar, despite his initial skepticism, took a closer look at the blueprint and begrudgingly admitted that the design was actually quite clever. However, he was quick to point out potential issues. The string might not withstand continuous shots at such intensity, and adding a wooden box at the back could create discomfort for the shooter. He then asked Logan how he planned to address these flaws. Logan, ever the strategist, immediately proposed a solution. Reducing the size of the bolts would allow for a smaller cartridge, making it disposable after use. The design would also self-reload after every shot. Logan then introduced a new term: magazine. Hamar, still finding the idea borderline insane, argued that even skilled crossbowmen struggled to fire twice per minute, meaning this concept defied common sense. Logan merely smiled, stating that this was a weapon developed in the future. Hamar, after some thought, assessed the materials needed and, without hesitation, stated that creating something far superior would only take a single month. Elsewhere, Logan's training of Victor had begun in full force. The boy, despite his small frame, was already showing signs of rapid development. In less than 3 days, he had undergone a remarkable transformation, pushing his limits beyond what Logan had initially expected. From a distance, Logan observed the young boy running, his body drenched in sweat, exhaustion evident in his movements. When the protagonist finally shouted for him to rest, Victor collapsed on the spot, gasping for air as his sister immediately rushed to his side, worry etched across her face. As Logan watched, he mused aloud, remarking that a mere 14-year-old had just successfully run 20 kilometers. The noble killer's potential was already beginning to bloom. Victor was undeniably talented, but what truly impressed Logan was not just his natural aptitude, it was his sheer perseverance, his unwavering resolve to push forward no matter how exhausted he became. Logan had seen many skilled fighters in his past life, warriors with incredible potential, but talent alone was never enough to create a true force of nature. It was persistence that defined the strongest among them, and Victor was proving that he had both. However, Logan also understood something crucial: violence was not something that came naturally to an assassin. Victor had not been born a killer. He had become one, molded by circumstances that had twisted him into the ruthless figure known as the noble killer. The more Logan thought about it, the more certain he became that something must have happened to his sister in his past life, something so devastating that it had shattered whatever innocence remained in Victor, leaving only his unrelenting thirst for revenge. But this time, Logan would not allow fate to unfold in the same way. He would guide Victor down a different path, one that would shape him into a weapon not fueled by vengeance alone, but by purpose. Without hesitation, Logan called out to the exhausted boy, instructing him to continue training, and announced that from that moment forward, he would teach him the Grandia Kingdom's fencing style, a fundamental discipline that all knight apprentices within the kingdom were required to master. This was no ordinary sword technique, it was the foundation of knighthood itself, and to master it was to take the first true step toward becoming a warrior of renown. Without wasting a second, Logan demonstrated the form with a single, fluid motion, his blade slicing through the air with such speed and precision that it created a gust of wind in its wake. Victor, despite his obvious fatigue, forced himself to watch intently, his gaze never leaving the blade. In his mind, he acknowledged that he was utterly exhausted, that he was standing at the very edge of collapse. But if enduring this training meant that he would one day be able to sleep in a comfortable bed, to live as something more than a slave, then it was all worth it. Summoning the last of his strength, Victor mimicked Logan's movement, replicating the motion with surprising accuracy. Logan's eyes widened slightly, not out of shock, but out of sheer admiration. With just one demonstration, the boy had already grasped the technique. His execution was not flawless, of course, but the precision, the instinct, it was far beyond what any ordinary person would be capable of. Logan had no doubts now Victor's talent surpassed even that of Ronian, and Ronian was already considered a genius among knights. Looking down at the boy, Logan made a declaration: if Victor could build his endurance to the point where he could perform the Grandia fencing style a full 1,000 times without error, he could rightfully be called a knight. The boy's eyes immediately lit up with excitement, the promise of freedom and status driving him forward even in the face of exhaustion. Satisfied, Logan informed Victor that if he ever needed anything, he could ask Rick for assistance. But Victor, his focus unwavering, replied that he needed nothing except one thing. He asked Logan to take care of his sister. Logan, though keeping his expression neutral, understood the deeper meaning behind the request. Even now, even after everything, Victor's first and only concern was her. She was his anchor, the force that kept him grounded, the one thing preventing him from succumbing to complete darkness. It was this attachment that made Victor an invaluable ally. So long as she remained by his side, he would never be a threat to Logan. However, Logan also knew that even if Victor did not personally participate in the upcoming war, his presence alone would still become a necessary force in the conflict. Meanwhile, the mercenaries under Kaisen's command were steadily becoming a uniquely powerful military force in their own right. But as promising as everything seemed, Logan knew better than to let optimism cloud his judgment. There were still many uncertainties ahead. Hamar might fail to properly manufacture the new crossbows. The mercenaries might struggle to wield them effectively, and even with all his planning, unforeseen obstacles could still arise. That was why he could only afford to be cautiously optimistic. If things didn't go as expected, he needed contingencies. Elsewhere, in the halls of House McLean, the patriarch sat in contemplation as Logan formally requested permission to participate in knight training. His father, while initially silent, ultimately gave his approval, though he seemed to question why Logan had suddenly become so determined to pursue such intense physical conditioning. Regardless of his personal doubts, however, he recognized that Logan's skills were developing at an alarming pace, and allowing him to train with the knights could serve as a true test of his abilities. The next scene shifted to the Heinkel clan training field, a vast open expanse within the forest, illuminated by the bright sunlight filtering through the trees. Here, the commander of the knights gathered his soldiers, calling for their full attention as he announced that from that day forward, young Master Logan McLean would be joining their ranks for training. A wave of astonishment rippled through the knights, many of whom could not believe that someone with a reputation as terrible as Logan's had been permitted to train among them. Some muttered in disbelief, others exchanged skeptical glances, and even Hale, the commander of the cavalry, felt a deep discomfort over the situation but chose to remain silent. A flashback revealed the conversation that had taken place between HLE and the Patriarch, where the Knight commander had initially protested the decision. He had argued that integrating Logan into the Knight training program would only create resentment among the soldiers, causing unnecessary tension. But the Patriarch's response had been firm. He was not asking for Logan to receive special treatment. He was ordering HLE to train Logan like any other recruit, putting him through the same grueling and unforgiving training that all Knights were subjected to. The Patriarch had not wanted Logan to be given privileges, he wanted him to earn his place. In the present, Hale still felt uneasy, believing that the Patriarch could have at least asked him to go easy on the young master. But then Logan spoke, addressing him directly, telling him not to worry. In a calm yet confident tone, Logan declared that if he fell behind even once during the next week of training, he would quit on his own. Hale's expression shifted. He saw this as an opportunity, a chance to humiliate Logan and get rid of him without directly disobeying the Patriarch's orders. And so, with malice in his heart, he immediately agreed, smirking as he silently decided that for the next 7 days, he would triple the intensity of training, making it so unbearably difficult that Logan would have no choice but to fail, and so, the training began. The Knights were put through hellish endurance drills, running through the dense forest while carrying their fellow soldiers on their backs. The grueling exercise pushed their bodies to the limit, with many Knights groaning in exhaustion. As complaints began to rise, Hay silenced them with a sharp command, reminding them that, as Knights, they spent their lives riding horses into battle, so they should understand what it felt like to be in the position of a horse, carrying an armored soldier across long distances. His words held a harsh logic, and the Knights, despite their exhaustion, had no choice but to push forward. Amidst the grueling pace, the soldiers whispered amongst themselves, many blaming Logan for the suffering they were enduring. Some cruelly speculated that the McLean heir would never last, that he would surely flee before the training could even be completed. However, their expectations were shattered. Contrary to their assumptions, Logan was not struggling, he was leading the charge. While others gasped for breath, their bodies on the verge of collapse, Logan ran steadily, carrying his companion without faltering. He did not complain, did not slow down, and in a shocking turn of events, he eventually moved to the front of the formation, taking the lead. Clay, watching from a distance, felt his entire worldview shift. This should be impossible, and yet it was happening before his very eyes. Worst of all, Logan was still smiling. As the brutal night training continued, Hale, the chief of the guard, observed the unexpected turn of events with increasing disbelief. What had begun as a calculated effort to break Logan's spirit had instead become a test of endurance for the other knights. Despite the grueling conditions, it was not the red-headed noble who seemed on the verge of collapsing, it was the rest of the unit. The knights who had initially scorned Logan and assumed he would fail miserably were now barely able to keep up, their bodies trembling from exhaustion while Logan continued to push forward with unwavering determination. Realizing that his original plan had backfired, Hale made a quick decision. He abruptly called for the training to stop immediately, much to the relief of the suffering knights, who collapsed onto the ground the moment the command was given. For them, it was a moment of desperately needed rest, but for Logan, it was an unwelcome interruption. Unlike the others, he was not tired at all, and if anything, he was disappointed that he couldn't continue pushing himself further. As Logan stood, unfazed, Hale cautiously approached him, still struggling to process what he had just witnessed. With a neutral tone, he asked how young Master Logan was feeling, fully expecting the boy to at least admit that the training was difficult. He assumed that if Logan showed even a hint of exhaustion or struggle, he could use that as a justification to ease off the intensity, or perhaps even dismiss him entirely. However, Logan's response shattered his expectations. With complete confidence, Logan stated that he could handle it, showing no signs of struggle or weakness. The boy even went a step further, praising the training itself, claiming that if this was the standard regimen of the knights, then they must be incredibly strong. Then, to Hale's horror, Logan casually mentioned that he was eager for even more training like this, his tone filled with genuine excitement. At that moment, Hale felt something strange discomfort. It wasn't anger, nor was it annoyance, it was something much deeper. It was the realization that he had lost. The plan to break Logan had utterly failed, and instead of leaving the training grounds as a humiliated noble, Logan had gained the admiration of many knights simply by enduring what they could barely withstand themselves. Le, who had once viewed Logan as nothing more than an entitled, troublesome brat, now found himself facing an entirely different kind of opponent. And worse yet, he could see it. Logan wasn't even at his limit. He was still holding back. Later that night, Logan found himself alone in the forest, contemplating the progress he had made. He wondered if all the knights had already left, but in truth, their training was only a backup plan in case his other strategies failed. However, if he could earn true loyalty from the knights through effort and discipline, then they could become a valuable military force for House McLean. He also took a moment to reflect on his own power. While his core strength would continue to grow naturally through meditation, physical combat training was equally essential. His body needed to be as strong as his energy. As he activated his inner power, he noticed something new, a change, a shift in his control, his perception, his ability to wield his strength with greater efficiency. A smile crept onto his lips as he realized that all of his efforts were beginning to pay off. Gripping his sword, he focused his core energy into the blade, closing his eyes before executing a perfect draw. He barely felt any resistance. His movements were sharper, faster, more refined. Though he was still at a 1-star core level, his strength had already reached a point where ordinary knights could no longer be considered his equals. He wondered if he reached 2 stars, could he truly rival advanced warriors like Patrick? The following day, a new challenge arose. Several different prototype crossbows were presented to Logan, but he rejected every single one. The designs, while functional, did not meet his expectations, and he immediately demanded to see the repeating crossbow that he had specifically requested. His frustration was evident, and his critique came with little patience. However, Hamar, the dwarf craftsman responsible for the project, was not amused by Logan's attitude. The moment he saw the noble's dismissive reaction, his irritation flared. Logan could see it. Dwarves took immense pride in their craftsmanship, and though he had been given the title of master, Hamar would not tolerate being treated as if his work was subpar. Noticing the dwarf's rising frustration, Logan immediately apologized, acknowledging that he had been rude. However, his next words were far more deliberate. Feigning ignorance, Logan insinuated that if this was truly the best that Hamar could do, then there was nothing more to say. He deliberately struck at the dwarf's pride, knowing that nothing would drive him more than a challenge to his skill. Logan then mocked his own expectations, stating that he had clearly overestimated what a craftsman of Hamar's caliber could accomplish. The moment the words left his mouth, the dwarf's entire demeanor changed. His grip on the crossbow tightened, his face darkened, and in a fit of rage, he very nearly snapped the weapon in half. His hands trembled with barely contained fury, but rather than exploding at Logan directly, he made a declaration. He would remake the weapon, he would prove his worth, and this time, the result would be undeniable. Watching as Hamar stormed off in fury, Logan couldn't help but smirk. It worked. The dwarf was now so angry that he would restart the entire project from scratch, driven by nothing more than his own pride. Logan mused to himself that if Hamar felt even more pressure, he might actually surpass even his own limits and create something truly incredible, and 1 month later, that was exactly what happened. Standing in front of Logan, Hamar proudly unveiled his newest masterpiece, a redesigned repeating crossbow, vastly superior to the prototypes from before. As Logan took hold of the weapon, he aimed it toward a target, pulled the trigger, and within seconds, 2 bolts shot out in rapid succession, striking their mark with precision. Hamar, grinning proudly, asked what his master thought of the final product. Though the design only fired 2 bolts instead of 3, it was lightweight, efficient, and easy to wield with one hand. Logan, however, was in disbelief. He hadn't expected Hamar to perfect the design so quickly, but more than that, he was stunned by how fast the weapon could reload and fire. Less than 5 seconds. That was unbelievable. In his past life, crossbows had been far larger, and while they had better range and accuracy, they had never been this efficient. But for cavalry combat, this new weapon was exceptional. However, Logan was so deep in thought that he completely ignored the dwarf's proud remarks. Hamar, noticing this, frowned, waving a hand in front of Logan's face and demanding to know what he was thinking about. Then, without warning, Logan grabbed the dwarf in his arms and lifted him off the ground. Hamar, completely taken aback, sputtered in protest, but Logan ignored him entirely and enthusiastically praised his work, declaring that he had done a fantastic job. The dwarf froze for a brief moment. He didn't know how to react. No noble had ever shown such genuine excitement over his work before. But as he processed Logan's words, a small, satisfied smirk crossed his face. Without hesitation, he laid out his next demand. Could Hamar produce 400 of these crossbows in 2 months? The sheer magnitude of the request hit Hamar like a hammer blow. His earlier embarrassment vanished, and his face twisted into a look of sheer disbelief. 400? Even with additional craftsmen assisting him, such mass production was an insane challenge. Weeks passed, and before long the results of their efforts were on full display. In the middle of an open training ground, a mercenary took aim with one of the new crossbows. With a firm grip and precise movements he fired, the bolt sailing through the air and striking a tree dead center, piercing through the thick bark. The impact was clean, powerful, and unnervingly precise. The one who had fired the shot was none other than Kai-san, the battle-hardened mercenary who had been skeptical of Logan's ideas from the very beginning. Yet, as he lowered the weapon, he remained silent, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The mercenaries standing behind him erupted into murmurs of excitement and disbelief, praising the range, accuracy, and sheer force of the weapon. For them, the ability to fire multiple bolts in succession with such consistency was something they had never seen before. Kai-san, still gripping the weapon, ran through every piece of logic he had regarding crossbows in his mind. By all practical standards, this should have been impossible. A crossbow that could be reloaded from the front maintained this level of speed, and still retained such incredible range and firepower it defied all common understanding of weaponry. As he stood there processing the implications, a thought crept into his mind: if an army of 300 or more mounted troops were equipped with these crossbows, then in combat they would be practically unstoppable. It was not just a new weapon, it was a revolutionary advantage. Still absorbing the enormity of what he had just witnessed, Kai-san turned toward Logan, his usual skepticism replaced by a newfound respect. He finally understood why the young noble had spoken so confidently about cavalry-wielding crossbows. He admitted that Logan truly was incredible. Logan, despite his usual confidence, responded shyly, as if modest about his success, but in reality, his mind was already focused on the next step. Even though they had made significant progress, Hamar had struggled immensely to complete the project. Logan reflected that, even with additional craftsmen assisting him, the fact that the dwarf had managed to finish the first batch of weapons in just 2 weeks was a feat in itself. However, Logan also understood the strategic risks involved. While he would love to share this breakthrough with the Order of Knights and the main army, there were too many potential dangers. If the design leaked before he had a chance to fully implement it, then other noble houses, factions, or even enemy forces could develop their own versions, completely negating the advantage he had worked so hard to create. For now, it was best to keep the technology within his own forces. With that in mind, Logan turned to Kai-san, his voice firm as he issued new orders from that day forward. The mercenaries would be equipped with the crossbows and would focus on exterminating all monsters within the territory. This was not just about testing the weapons. It was about establishing control over their lands, eliminating threats, and perfecting combat efficiency. Seeing the uncertainty on Kai-san's face, Logan challenged him directly, asking if the mercenary truly believed it was impossible. For a brief moment, Kai-san felt a surge of resistance, but when his eyes drifted toward the tree, the bolt still embedded deep within the wood, he found himself reconsidering. Perhaps it was possible. Logan didn't allow for further doubt. He reminded Kai-san that they could not afford failure. If they did not succeed, then all of their efforts would be meaningless. With that, the decision was made. As Kai-san studied his young master, a realization dawned upon him. Logan had not created this weapon simply to hunt monsters. No, this was something far greater. The boy was preparing for war. Meanwhile, in another part of the kingdom, a soldier remarked to his companion about a truly astonishing sight. His words were spoken in sheer disbelief as he described a young noble who had been carrying 2 companions on his back while running through the training grounds. The soldiers surrounding him stared in shock, unable to comprehend how Logan had reached such a level of strength. At first, many had assumed that Logan was merely an arrogant noble who had returned to training after his humiliating defeat at the hands of his brother. However, as time passed, those assumptions crumbled. Logan had not only improved, he had surpassed expectations entirely. More than a month had passed since training began, and what had originally been designed as a punishment, a method to push Logan into quitting, had transformed into something else entirely. His persistence had inspired the lower-ranking knights, many of whom had become complacent in their training, growing weaker due to a lack of discipline. Seeing Logan push himself far beyond what was required, refusing to yield even when others expected him to, had sparked a new level of motivation among the knights. As a result, training standards rose dramatically, and for the first time in years, many soldiers began forming genuine bonds with their warhorses, treating them not just as tools, but as partners in battle. At one point, a knight, exhausted from carrying his companion, jokingly remarked that he had eaten too much the night before and apologized for his weight. His companion, despite his own fatigue, simply smiled and told him not to worry, he would carry him no matter what. Moments like these, which had once seemed impossible in such rigid military training, had become commonplace. This unintentional shift had fostered an unexpected but invaluable result: true camaraderie. Hlei, the once doubtful commander, found himself reflecting on the immense change that had taken place. Initially, he had persisted with the harsh training because he had wanted Logan to fail. But now, looking at what had been accomplished, he felt something completely different: pride. He admired the young master. He respected him. However, in that moment, as he looked toward Logan, he felt an uneasy sensation. His neck tingled, as though he were being watched. Elsewhere, Logan, now seated cross-legged on his bed, entered a deep meditative state. His training had pushed his body to its limits, and now he sought to stimulate his internal consciousness with focused meditation. As he delved into this state, he felt it a shift, a subtle but unmistakable transformation within his core energy. A smirk played at the corners of his lips. He was close. If he continued progressing like this, whether as a superhuman, a master, or an archmage, it wouldn't matter. He would transcend them all. As Logan sat in his meditation, pushing the limits of his body and mind, the final breakthrough came at last. His core, which had been on the verge of evolving for days, suddenly erupted with an immense glow, illuminating the dimly lit room with its raw energy. His body trembled as the transformation unfolded. His breathing grew erratic, his heart pounded with unnatural force, and an ancient, unknown language began to spill from his lips as if drawn from the very depths of his soul. The energy from his core began to surge outward, no longer confined within him, spilling into the room, filling the air with an oppressive presence that made even the walls tremble. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the chaos subsided. The once disorganized core, unstable and wild, shifted. It compressed, condensed, and then, perfectly reformed. No longer an unrefined mass of energy, his core had finally taken the shape of a perfect sphere. Logan's eyes snapped open, and as he took a sharp breath, his body felt lighter, his strength felt sharper, and for the first time in this life, he could feel the power coursing through him with absolute clarity. The moment he had been working toward had arrived. His two-star core was complete. A triumphant grin spread across his face as he clenched his fists, fully absorbing the new strength that now resided within him. This was no minor achievement. It was the foundation he needed to learn the second technique from the sword secrets, a skill that, in his past life, had taken many years to perfect. If the first technique had given him overwhelming combat prowess, then the second was bound to be even more devastating. More importantly, he knew that if he could fully master this technique before the war, then not even a high-ranking knight would be able to stand in his way. The next morning, the sun shone brilliantly over the flat plains outside of McLean's territory. In the distance, monsters roamed aimlessly, unaware of the coming slaughter. The creatures moved through the grasslands, their forms casting long shadows in the sunlight. Then, without warning, the thunderous sound of galloping horses shattered the morning calm. The monsters turned, their primal instincts immediately sensing danger, but before they could react, an army of mounted warriors surged into view. The mercenaries, moving in perfect synchronization, advanced toward their prey with deadly precision. Kaisan, positioned at the front, raised his fist into the air, signaling the moment of attack. The moment he clenched it, the entire formation shifted seamlessly into a battle stance. With unwavering discipline, the mercenaries readied their crossbows, lining up their sights as the creatures began to flee. However, there was no escape. In a single devastating volley, the mounted warriors unleashed a storm of bolts. The projectiles ripped through the air, their deadly accuracy ensuring that the fleeing monsters had no chance of survival. The beasts that tried to outrun the formation were struck in their backs, pinned to the ground before they could even roar in defiance. Within moments, the entire battlefield was littered with lifeless creatures, their monstrous forms riddled with bolts. The swarm of over 100 monsters had been eradicated in less than 10 seconds. As the final enemy fell, silence settled over the battlefield. The mercenaries, momentarily stunned by their own efficiency, took a moment to process what they had just done. The reality of their strength finally sank in, and within seconds, a wave of exhilaration spread through the ranks. Cheers erupted among the warriors. They had done it. The new weapon had changed everything. Not only was it devastatingly effective, but it had practically no recoil, allowing them to fire rapidly and maintain control. The excitement among them was palpable, yet Kaisan remained silent, gripping his crossbow tightly as he stared at the aftermath of the battle. Logan, who had been observing from a distance, analyzed the results with satisfaction. In his mind, he assessed the growth of his forces, recognizing that the initial struggles they had faced during their first hunt had completely vanished. The progress they had made was undeniable. As he watched the victorious warriors celebrate, Kaisan finally turned to him, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. He asked if his master was satisfied with what they had accomplished. Logan simply nodded, implying that yes, the results were acceptable. However, his words carried a deeper meaning. This was just the beginning. Kaison, still deep in thought, hesitated before speaking again. He admitted that the mercenaries had been a complete mess during their first hunt, but their growth had been undeniable. However, he couldn't ignore the greater question, why was Logan making all these preparations? He had never heard of a mercenary army with this much firepower. He wondered aloud whether Logan intended to hunt monsters across the entire continent, or if there was another reason behind all of this. However, before Logan could respond, a shout interrupted them. An unknown knight, breathless and exhausted, arrived at the scene. Kaison immediately turned, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon as he asked what was happening. The knight, still gasping for air, spoke between ragged breaths. Rick had sent him. Logan, instantly alert, furrowed his brows. Before he could question further, the knight delivered the message. Something had happened. Logan's entire world seemed to shift as the knight delivered the shocking news. Viscount Tessin had declared war against House McLean. For a brief moment, Logan froze, his mind racing to process the implications. War? Now? He had expected conflict, but for it to erupt this soon, this was not part of the plan. His body tensed as his mind immediately began calculating, trying to assess what this meant for House McLean.
The cloaked man roared with fury, calling out House McLean in front of the glowing orb. A fierce spirit appeared, face etched with wrath, condemning House McLean for his forefathers' tragic deaths. Gripping the orb tightly, the summoner vowed revenge, flames of hatred burning deeply within his eyes. The nobles murmured among themselves, questioning if vengeance for history's sins was still a valid reason. As tension thickened, a noblewoman asked calmly, "Your lordship, how will you answer this accusation?" He entered the war room, voice steady, declaring the enemy's march toward their northern defense line. The nobles murmured among themselves, confused, as he proposed defending from within the castle walls immediately. One advisor warned of chaos if enemy knights broke through, first urging caution before reinforcing their perimeter. Another interrupted, suggesting peaceful talks instead, just before his fist struck the table with frustration. He growled, eyes sharp, "There's no peace in delay. If we hesitate again, our house will fall." The nobles slammed the document, furious that a rogue faction claimed land without the royal council's approval. He pointed sharply, voice rising, accusing them of betrayal. Convinced the enemy's plans were long in motion, his glare cut across the chamber, silencing anyone suggesting peace as a solution to rising conflict. He roared, commanding everyone to prepare for war and quickly draft a decisive, effective counterattack strategy. With burning eyes, he warned there would be no debate, and none dared to challenge his command. The maid stepped forward cautiously, her voice trembling as she raised a question none dared ask. "Will the young masters also fight?" she asked, startling the room and drawing the lord's gaze. The question hung heavy in silence. She braced herself as his chair creaked from sudden movement. He declared firmly both of his sons would stand beside him on the battlefield without exception. One knight whispered in awe, his son. He had finally awakened to his long-dormant inner power. The attendant reported confidently both young masters possessed force abilities vital for strengthening their weakened army. A second servant added nervously, "The young master is away, currently exterminating monsters near the forest." Realizing urgency, he bolted from the castle, determined to deliver the message without delay or error. In the field, Logan halted training, sensing someone approach as wind carried the messenger's desperate footsteps. Iogen's eyes narrowed. The moment had come. He understood war was near, and his duty awaited. Logan's expression hardened. War wasn't expected for months. Something had forced the enemy to attack early. The messenger explained customs were ignored, and the enemy marched the moment war was declared aloud. Logan clenched his fist. He needed to leave immediately or miss the chance to impact battle. The mercenary unit stood assembled. A soldier stepped forward, shouting their readiness to move on command. Logan took a deep breath. This wasn't just war. It was his first true responsibility in blood. A grinning warrior joked they would have started a war themselves if nothing happened soon, half serious, half reckless. Logan stared, unsettled. Such words revealed a hunger for battle he found deeply concerning and dangerous. Another soldier praised their new weapons, eager to test them properly, confidence spreading like fire through the ranks. Logan observed their eagerness. It felt excessive, but part of him understood where it truly came from. He lowered his gaze to broken blades and bloodied earth. These mercenaries weren't bluffing. They were prepared. Logan tightened his belt. Rallying his thoughts, battle was near, and hesitation could no longer exist. He shouted with conviction that they were already strong enough, fire burning behind his calm gaze. Without warning, hostile forces advanced, catching allied scouts by surprise, triggering sudden deployment orders from the command post. Logan's mercenary company mobilized swiftly, quicker than any noble force predicted, roaring back across the valley line. By sunrise, Urbasia fell. Their speed overwhelmed defenses, and the victory exceeded every noble's early war estimate. A soldier rushed in, reporting that enemy forces included 10,000 conscripts and hundreds of trained troops. The commander slammed the floor in anger, declaring this escalation a declaration of full-scale, no-mercy war. He couldn't believe Traegon would cross the line so recklessly, risking everything for power and territory. He recalled history. Not even major kingdoms summoned so many soldiers without suffering massive consequences afterward. With burning eyes, he demanded answers why Traegon would go this far, risking total annihilation without justification. A soldier delivered grim news no reinforcements would come. They were completely cut off and alone. The lady panicked, refusing to believe it. She insisted there must be a mistake or misunderstanding. She recalled prior promises. House Karos had confirmed support. Desperation crept into her voice as hope faded. He turned, his voice calm but decisive. No more waiting. Every man must now prepare to fight. A soldier echoed the command, shouting across the hall. It was now survival with no backup. Despite their allies' silence, Logan chose to act, unwilling to rely on promises already proven false. Messengers were dispatched urgently, spreading the call to arms across towns and strongholds in loyal lands. 50 knights assembled under Logan's banner, veterans sworn to protect their home, prepared to strike without hesitation. Beside them stood 50 trained soldiers, hardened men, ready to stand firm against overwhelming enemy numbers. And with 200 reserve fighters joining, their unified force prepared to face impossible odds together. A soldier looked up in shock as the enemy's massive formation stretched far across the horizon. Logan's men braced themselves. The enemy formation was unlike anything they had prepared to face before. They hadn't expected House Traegon to deploy its full power. The field now echoed with tension. Logan's gaze pierced ahead. He demanded clarity. Where was Logan? His son's presence was now essential. Logan appeared calmly, assuring everyone he would lead the force's rear and fight through whatever was coming. While riding into position, Logan denied the rumors, insisting his brother would never betray their cause. He shouted firmly, defending his sibling's name. To him, loyalty was something proven by past deeds. Memories surfaced his brother walking alone through the barracks, quietly preparing for a conflict no one expected. Logan recalled his brother's promise they'd train, rebuild House McLean, and restore their family's name together. With quiet certainty, Logan whispered his brother would never run away. Not then, not now, never. Logan flinched at whispers behind him. Soldiers were already doubting the loyalty of his older brother. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed the Baron's son had fled, leaving others to carry the burden. Logan turned to Logan, firm and direct. He must now fight for both himself and his brother. He reminded Logan not to waver. Strength of mind was as vital as skill with a sword. Gripping his arm, Logan muttered to himself he still believed in his son, even through uncertainty and silence. The enemy commander raised his sword high, declaring vengeance for everything taken from his broken house. With a roar, he ordered all units to charge, unleashing the fury of his gathered army. As the enemy advanced, Logan shouted to his troops, this would be the final clash together. Parak stood proudly, his weapon gleaming. Today he'd repay every debt carved into his family's honor. The battlefield shook under thousands of feet. Both sides stormed forward, and no one looked back again. Logan surged ahead on horseback, leading the charge without hesitation as the ground trembled beneath him. Crimson energy burst from his body, surrounding his horse as his force power ignited the field. His weapon flared with raw might. The frontline knights tightened formation, following his lead into battle. Shouting with fierce resolve, Logan vowed to break apart the enemy's first wave before they advanced. With eyes burning and lance raised, he roared, driving forward like a storm, unshaken and unstoppable. A warrior from the enemy side leapt forward, landing with force that shattered the ground beneath. Crimson light exploded on impact. Logan's strike collided head-on, unleashing a thunderous shock across the battlefield. Logan's eyes widened in disbelief. The enemy had completely blocked his attack without flinching or backing down. His opponent emerged through the dust, calm and steady. Logan growled, realizing this foe was dangerous. A slow, confident grin formed on the enemy's face. He welcomed the challenge with unsettling excitement. A young soldier panted heavily, clutching his weapon, trying to steady his breath and calm down. Fear overtook him. The battlefield stank of death. His hands trembled, unable to hold his stance. Screams echoed nearby. One man clutched his bleeding arm. Another cried out, collapsing under a blade. He froze, wide-eyed, helpless. Another comrade called out for help as chaos closed in from all sides. The young soldier shook his head, terrified. "No, no, no!" he whispered, heart pounding with rising panic. The battlefield burned red. A soldier screamed as enemies closed in and panic overtook the front line. He gritted his teeth. We're losing ground, he thought. The enemy's pressure was too overwhelming now. We're fighting at a disadvantage, he muttered. Their front squad hasn't even used full strength yet. A club slammed into his shoulder. He collapsed, pain shooting through his body like lightning. A masked enemy roared, spear raised to finish him off. The downed soldier rolled, eyes wide in fear. A spear slammed into the ground beside him, knocking the enemy off balance in an instant. The masked attacker turned in rage, ready to strike again, but was met with a surprise. Another ally shouted, "Take up your spear!" as he stabbed the enemy through with perfect timing. The wounded soldier dropped his shoulders, overwhelmed with relief he had narrowly escaped death's grasp for now. Grateful and trembling, he looked up and stammered, unable to finish before emotion overtook him. Blood splattered across his face as the enemy fell. For a moment, he thought it was over. Then his stomach turned. Another soldier dropped nearby, pierced through the chest with a brutal, clean strike. Panic surged. He screamed, turned, and bolted from the chaos, boots tearing across the bloodied field. And his thoughts raced. "I have to run. Get to the back. Stay alive. Stay far." But behind him, heavy footsteps followed. The sound of pursuit thudded louder with every frantic breath. The battlefield erupted in screams. Soldiers fell around him, and the red haze of fear spread fast. He stood frozen, shivering uncontrollably. His breath hitched as the chaos closed in without warning. From every side, enemies charged. The formation was shattered. "We've been surrounded!" someone shouted in pure dread. The soldier looked up, bloodied and pale. His lips trembled. "Are we all going to die here?" Suddenly, a massive explosion cracked the field. One soldier stood glowing red, unleashing terrifying force alone. Logan charged with full power, the battlefield trembling as his force-enhanced momentum shattered enemy ground lines. His opponent skidded back but held firm, surprised by the Baron's sheer speed and crushing presence. The soldier coughed blood, eyes wide. "You are as strong as they say, Baron," he admitted. Logan glared fiercely, hand tightening on his weapon. Unsettled that this enemy still stood after impact, he realized in disbelief his force-imbued strike had been blocked. This opponent was far more dangerous than expected. Logan's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected an upper-class knight to appear under House Tessen's command. He observed the enemy formation. 4 others were present, all skilled enough to be classified as knights. Realization struck. This is why Haman moved so boldly, his confidence backed by hidden strength and strategy. "And then," Logan scoffed, "so, I'm your assigned target. They sent you to bring me down?" The masked knight grinned confidently. "Yes!" "Are you impressed?" he asked, blade ready and steps unshaken. Logan rode ahead, aware the enemy's plan was clear: separate him and eliminate his elite knights. He gritted his teeth. "If I get surrounded, then so will the rest," he thought. "And if that happens?" Logan whispered, feeling the pressure build. He couldn't afford a single mistake. His hand reached for his weapon. He had made his choice. There would be no retreat. With force blazing around him, Logan roared forward. "I will not let that happen!" he shouted. The knight staggered back, clutching his chest as pain surged through his armor from the impact. He looked up in shock, eyes locked on the enemy who unleashed power beyond anything he expected. The red-haired warrior lunged forward, his weapon glowing fiercely, striking with speed that left no time to react. He flinched, remembering past failures, but rage burned brighter now. He would not retreat. Not again. He stomped forward, raising his blade, gaze fixed ahead, refusing to yield no matter the growing danger. The red-haired warrior swung hard, forcing the enemy back, his blade sharp and strikes without hesitation. Steel clashed with steel. He pushed forward, fearless, breaking their stance with power earned through painful trials. He roared with anger, demanding honor from men who wore armor but lacked the heart of knights. One knight mocked him, stepping away slowly, dismissing the threat, confident the man would collapse from exhaustion. Another warned them. Eyes narrowed. This man, worn but skilled, still held power honed through countless battles. He leapt high above the battlefield, sword aimed downward, preparing to strike with speed and precision. A knight below noticed too late as the red energy swirled, signaling an attack was coming fast. The warrior landed hard, blade crashing down, sending shockwaves as armor clashed against magic-empowered steel. Another enemy tried to counter but staggered mid-motion, caught off guard by the warrior's relentless power. Grimacing, the red-haired fighter held strong, fending off the ambush, blade rising again with unshaken control. Blood dripped steadily onto the ground, each drop a sign of the damage already done. The knight smirked coldly, satisfied with the hit, confident that victory was now within easy reach. Without hesitation, he drew his bow back, targeting the wounded warrior, preparing to finish the fight. The arrow pierced deep into the red-haired man's side, forcing him to cry out in pain. He stumbled backward, blood trailing behind with each step, breath heavy as strength began to fade. He staggered forward, wounded but upright, gripping his sword tightly, surrounded by enemies on every side. They moved to flank him, knowing the knight blocked frontal strikes. Cornering him was the surest tactic. A blade stabbed into his side, pain shooting through him, knees nearly buckling under the force. Through the agony, he shouted a name, Logan, urging the boy to escape and survive. With blood dripping down his back, he stood firm, praying Logan would carry on the family name. The army marched under the blood-red sky, metal clashing as their boots crushed the scorched ground. Their leader watched from above, confident his secret upper-class knight would guarantee a swift victory. With a cruel smile, he vowed to crush Parter and seize full control of Macaline Castle. He imagined his triumph, but a distant thunder shook the earth, breaking his moment of fantasy. Startled, he turned sharply, his face pale. That wasn't thunder. It was the unmistakable sound of horses. A rider rushed through the battlefield haze, yelling desperately to his lord with urgent, breathless panic. He dismounted quickly, reporting that a mounted troop had appeared beyond the eastern ridge without warning. He estimated 300 riders, catching their commander off guard with such an unexpected number the commander frowned, puzzled that House Macaline still had men and even more. "Why no spears?" the soldier explained grimly, gripping his sword. Their only weapons were long, narrow wooden cases strapped tightly. The commander scoffed at the report, dismissing the crossbows as weak tools used by hunters. He ordered the rear lines to advance, confident the archers would handle the riders with ease. The battlefield lit up as bolts flew. He mocked the attackers, calling them untrained commoner rabble. His knight obeyed without hesitation, but before more orders came, a bolt tore through the air. Pain struck his chest. His confident smirk vanished, replaced by shock as his body collapsed backward. One knight turned in fear, eyes wide, realizing their commander had fallen before giving clear orders. A thunderous charge shook the land. 300 riders advanced, their bolts already whistling through the wind. At the front, a red-haired warrior unleashed a volley mid-gallop, hands steady, eyes locked on target. He narrowed his gaze, recognizing the enemy formations and gaps from a lifetime of battlefield memories. Ahead lay fallen bodies and shattered armor. Macaline's counterattack had only just begun its ruthless retaliation. A soldier screamed as blood sprayed across his face. His comrade struck down in one clean motion. Another fell, armor cracked, crawling backward in panic. Unable to reach the sword lying beside him, he stammered for help, but no allies came, only the shadow of death drawing closer and closer. The red-haired warrior advanced without hesitation, eyes glowing, blade aimed straight toward the terrified soldier's exposed throat. His grip tightened, jaw clenched. Mercy had no place here, not after what House Macaline had endured. With a furious command, the red-haired warrior roared for his troops to unleash every bolt instantly. The enemy captain froze in panic, sweat pouring down, stunned by the firepower about to erupt. A storm of bolts tore through the battlefield, piercing armor and flesh before cries could even rise. As flames engulfed the battlefield, Logan walked alone through the ruins, eyes locked on the enemy. His footsteps echoed in silence. The enemy, sensing a presence, shifted uneasily within their defensive formation. The enemy commander smirked beneath his helmet, amused that the fallen family's remnant still had strength. Before more words were spoken, 2 heads flew through the air, severed cleanly by Logan's swift blade. Blood sprayed across the floor. Logan stood still, sword dripping, eyes fixed on the next target approaching. Arrows sliced through the air, shields raised too late. Soldiers fell, panic spreading faster than commands could form. One soldier realized too late they should have raised shields sooner. His breath hitched as he turned toward command. "Raise your bows! Shoot back!" The order rang out. Archers scrambled to formation, fingers fumbling arrows with urgency. Without hesitation, archers released their volley. Strings snapped in unison, a desperate response against the approaching force. An arrow landed ahead of the enemy line, blazing with magic, marking the beginning of a counterattack. The soldier's face paled, his body froze. He realized the incoming arrows were unlike anything they'd faced. Across the field, Logan advanced calmly. The enemy archers fired, but their arrows were not touching him. A single enemy arrow dropped. It glowed faintly, dragging black smoke as it pierced into the ground. The arrow struck deep, shaking the battlefield. Dust erupted. Screams followed as the impact shattered their front line. Bodies flew in every direction. Chaos spread instantly. Their defense crumbled before Logan even lifted his sword. Commanders stared in disbelief. Arrows had shattered their ranks. "What on earth just happened?" one of them muttered. Across the field, Logan stood unmoving. The enemy's rear line was destroyed by a single enchanted arrow. They didn't use magic. "They have crossbows!" someone shouted. Confusion deepened. Their weapons didn't match the destruction caused. "Get our mounted unit! Flank them now!" the commander barked, pointing. Soldiers scrambled, chasing clarity through chaos. Flags raised high. Orders flew across the field. Armored men prepared again, unaware another strike was coming. 2 soldiers exchanged nods. No words were needed. The command was clear they would launch the flank. One mounted his horse quickly, armor clanking. The unit responded together, shields tight, hooves pounding the earth. Galloping forward, the commander raised his arm, his voice cut through the chaos, commanding unwavering aggression forward. "Go! Crush those scoundrels!" he shouted. Their cavalry surged like a wave, aiming to break the enemy. On the other side, a red-haired man grinned confidently. "We didn't even have to go further." The blade pierced through the thick air, narrowly missing Logan's shoulder but cutting through his armor's strap. Logan grimaced, feeling the sting along his collarbone. He gripped his sword, eyes burning with determination. His eyes widened suddenly. Something massive approached fast, Reflexes kicked in, breath sharp, heart pounding violently. A massive fist whooshed past his head. Logan ducked low, rolling aside before the next brutal swing. The towering knight sneered loudly. "You can't do anything but dodge, eh? You little weasel!" His fist clenched. Two knights argued nearby. The younger knight shouted, "Behind you!" But his warning seemed completely ignored again. Logan turned, eyes widening. A shadow loomed behind him. His thoughts scrambled, questioning this unexpected battlefield reality. Breathing hard, Logan realized his training meant nothing here. His opponents fought ruthlessly without any held back. His fingers clenched tighter around the sword's handle. Despite trembling, he planted his feet firmly against retreat. A deep voice echoed in his mind, "Unleash your strength without fear." Logan's resolve hardened, eyes blazing. Logan's eyes steadied, doubt fading. This moment demanded action, regardless of hesitation or looming personal fear. The enemy turned away, seemingly careless. Logan's instincts screamed this opening was rare. He sprinted forward without hesitation. He focused entirely on his target. "Whatever happens next, this is my only chance!" Logan's legs pushed harder. Sword gripped tightly, Logan lunged forward. His opponent's back was fully exposed. One clean strike could decide everything. With all gathered strength, Logan's blade slashed across the enemy's back. The heavy armor split under pressure. Logan stood, catching his breath. He glanced around cautiously. Suddenly, a mocking voice echoed, "Too easy, wasn't it?" Before reacting, sharp sounds followed. Logan's ears caught at first arrows slicing through the air, landing dangerously close. Confused, Logan muttered, "Arrows?" His eyes darted around, searching for hidden archers or the next sudden threat. He shifted his stance immediately, preparing to dodge. His instincts told him standing still meant certain death. A heavy body collapsed beside him with a loud thud. Blood stained the ground beneath fallen armor. Logan stood breathless, his eyes locking onto the horizon. A familiar yet commanding presence approached steadily. In the distance, cavalry units appeared. Logan's heart sank. This wasn't part of their original defense plan. One knight recognized him instantly. Eyes wide with disbelief, he shouted nervously, "El Logan? What are you doing here?" Logan clenched his fists. Despite exhaustion, his stance remained firm. This battle wasn't over, not until he prevailed. Without hesitation, the mounted knight charged forward. Logan steadied himself, ready for whatever was coming next. A commander roared orders, "Pursue those men with crossbows! Lord's command!" His cavalry stormed forward without hesitation. The ground trembled beneath Logan's feet. Dust clouds rose, an unstoppable cavalry charge approached like crashing waves. Logan faced the overwhelming army calmly. Despite the odds, his mind calculated their formation's weaknesses instantly. He commanded firmly, "Kite shields, form a strong defensive stance, prepare for incoming frontal impact, stay ready!" Behind makeshift defenses, crossbowmen positioned carefully. "Aim slightly lower!" the lead gunner shouted, fingers tightening around the triggers. A soldier asked nervously, "What now?" Logan didn't flinch, calmly analyzing the enemy cavalry's vulnerable positions. Logan's lips curled slightly. With confidence, he commanded, "Aim for their horses!" His strategy immediately changed everything. The archers grinned wickedly, taking their positions with newfound purpose. They prepared to cripple the enemy advance. "Shoot!" Logan shouted. A volley of arrows launched simultaneously, cutting through the air toward the galloping cavalry. The arrows struck true. Horses stumbled violently. Riders fell helplessly, chaos erupting across the battlefield's front lines. Panic overtook the cavalry ranks. Riders screamed, horses collapsed, and bodies slammed hard against the unforgiving ground. Logan stood quietly amid the chaos, eyes cold. "Fools," he muttered, watching their foolish charge completely fail. He glanced toward the horizon. "Victory means nothing if my family remains lost." His thoughts grew heavier. Clenching his fists, Logan vowed, "I'll rebuild my family, even if this victory costs me everything else." With authority, Logan barked, "Kai, take over command!" He turned swiftly, setting out toward his greater mission. A soldier spotted Logan charging ahead alone. Shocked, he gasped, "Master Logan!" Before calling others to respond, confusion filled their minds. "Victory's nearly ours. Why rush now?" The soldier wondered, concern growing rapidly stronger. Watching Logan's fierce charge, the soldier sighed. He fights beyond his limits like an untouchable upper-class knight. Realizing the danger, he shouted, "To hell with it! Everyone, protect Master Logan. Prepare defensive formation immediately." A powerful energy erupted ahead. Crimson force swirled violently as Logan broke through enemy lines alone. Logan's sword struck with brutal force, crimson energy flaring. His blade pierced through the armored enemy cleanly. A familiar voice echoed in Logan's mind, "Absolute fool!" He clenched his teeth, recalling painful past failures. Despite the heavy blow received, the enemy knight sneered. "You still charged, knowing death stood ahead." Without hesitation, Logan leapt over the collapsing soldiers, using the momentum to close distance once again. With unstoppable momentum, Logan slammed his sword down, sending shockwaves across the battlefield, scattering enemies everywhere. Logan stumbled slightly, blood dripping from his side. His grip tightened despite the sharp pain shooting through. Breathing heavily, he scanned the battlefield. His instincts screamed something was wrong. This wasn't normal enemy behavior. From the shadows, a commanding figure watched intently, his eyes sharp, calculating Logan's every move carefully. Multiple enemy knights dashed forward aggressively. Logan noticed their unusual movements, reckless and uncoordinated, lacking proper discipline. Why are they throwing themselves recklessly? Logan thought grimly. A crimson aura surrounded the charging enemies ominously. Swords clashed violently, sparks flying in every direction. Logan's arms ached under the relentless counterattacks. Enemies surrounded him quickly. He spun defensively, deflecting blades, his movements precise despite mounting exhaustion. The enemy commander roared in frustration, "Damn it!" His face twisted with anger, realizing his tactics failed. The battlefield shook. Fiery explosions erupted nearby. Logan's counterattack triggered chaos, forcing enemies to scatter instantly. One soldier froze, fear overtaking his senses. His eyes reflected the flames consuming the battlefield ahead. Logan dashed forward, flames trailing behind him. His eyes locked ahead, determined to finish everything today. With a powerful leap, he exploded through enemy lines. The battlefield trembled from the overwhelming force. The enemy commander roared in disbelief. "What just happened?" His eyes scanned the burning battlefield in shock. Smoke rose around them. Through the haze, Logan stood firm, his figure casting a dominant silhouette forward. Logan turned slowly, his gaze sharp and unyielding. With one word, he ended their hopeless resistance. Soldiers fell helplessly, flames surrounding them. Amid the chaos, a desperate voice screamed out, "Logan!" Logan stood tall, surrounded by fire. His unwavering presence marked the battlefield's end and his undeniable victory. Logan approached steadily. The battlefield quieted. Behind him, his comrades held back, knowing this was his fight. The enemy commander's thoughts raced. "I saw him back there. How did he cross so quickly?" Sweat formed on the commander's brow. "How did he break through every line without me even noticing?" His sharp eyes darted across the battlefield. Realization struck too late. The bodies already paved Logan's path. Through the field of fallen enemies, Logan stepped forward calmly. His expression was unwavering, his purpose clear. Logan halted his advance. "Not me. That's not important right now," he replied calmly, scanning the battlefield. The commander chuckled weakly. "I don't know the battle's outcome, but your presence means we're winning." Logan nodded once. His confident voice cut through the tension. "Yes, we're winning," he affirmed without hesitation. With a reassuring pat on Logan's shoulder, the commander smiled. "Good," he whispered with quiet relief. "You did well," the commander added softly, walking forward with newfound peace as flames settled behind them. The knight narrowed his eyes. How did this young brat become so fearsome, he thought, heart racing, barely in his 20s, yet commanding battlefields, the knight thought bitterly, watching Logan stand confidently amidst destruction. Memories flooded back. "At his age, I struggled endlessly just to hold a sword properly," he admitted, but shaking off the doubt, he gripped his weapon tightly. "No, none of that matters right now." Dark energy surged around him. "That fool is about to die, no matter what." The knight resolved grimly. Logan stepped forward confidently. The enemy knights watched cautiously, aware his strength wasn't something easily dismissed. The commander analyzed carefully. Logan may stand at an upper-class knight's level, his growth is terrifying, but still, he remains vulnerable against experienced mid-class knights, the commander thought, suppressing his growing concern. If Logan handles those two mid-class knights, perhaps he'll withstand that upper-class knight's overwhelming strength, he calculated. Logan smiled toward his father. "I will handle this, father," he promised firmly, stepping into the battlefield. Logan's father placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "No, Logan, he's too strong for you." Logan clenched his fists, determination rising. His body trembled not from fear but from unshakable, burning conviction. "Under these conditions," Logan exhaled slowly. "I could even defeat you, father," he added without hesitation. He stepped forward confidently. "Please, leave him to me," Logan requested, his unwavering gaze fixed ahead. Standing tall against the setting sun, Logan's expression hardened. He was ready to face whatever awaited. Logan's father stepped back reluctantly. "All right," he muttered, knowing this moment belonged entirely to his son. Before leaving, he turned slightly. "Be careful, son," he said quietly, his eyes filled with hidden worry. Logan smirked faintly, confidence unwavering. He exhaled softly, prepared for the decisive clash waiting before him. Logan whispered, "Let's end this quickly, father." With a swift step forward, he charged directly at enemies. Sword raised high, Logan's eyes sharpened. With flawless technique, he launched into battle, slicing through enemy defenses. The upper-class knight waited calmly, his cold eyes studying Logan's every move, confident in his superiority. With a sudden burst of dark energy, the knight clenched his sword tighter, his aura flaring dangerously. "You dare challenge me, you brat!" the knight roared, crimson energy swirling wildly around his entire body. Without hesitation, Logan dashed forward, determined to close the distance before his opponent's overwhelming power stabilized. Wind howled around him. Logan's eyes focused sharply. Nothing else mattered except victory in this moment. Logan's boots pressed hard against the ground, his body surrounded by blazing flames, prepared for the final clash. In one explosive motion, he leapt high, flames trailing behind him like a comet descending rapidly. The upper-class knight raised his sword, sensing the overwhelming pressure from Logan's incoming, unstoppable aerial strike. With a deafening boom, Logan's sword crashed down, sending shockwaves across the battlefield and breaking defenses instantly. The knight stumbled back, pain etched across his face. He struggled to withstand the fierce, relentless assault. Logan skidded to a sudden stop, dust swirling. His breathing was sharp, yet his stance remained firm. The knight's eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" he muttered, struggling to comprehend Logan's resilience despite visible exhaustion. "Even considering my injuries, I can't sense mastery from him. His strength feels incomplete," the knight analyzed quickly, "but the fact he pushed me back." The knight's thoughts trailed off, lips tightening under his helmet. "It means he's overexerted himself," he concluded with a dark grin, eyes narrowing, sensing his advantage clearly. A powerful explosion echoed across the battlefield. Logan stood firm, his gaze locked on the approaching threat. The knight charged, sword raised high. "This is my only chance!" Logan prepared himself for the impact. The knight roared furiously, "Die!" His blade descended with overwhelming force, aiming straight for Logan's unguarded position. Logan raised his sword just in time. Their weapons clashed violently, sparks flying through the smoky air. Blades collided repeatedly. Logan's arms trembled slightly, but his stance remained solid despite the brutal force exchanged. Logan stomped forward, forcing the knight back. Flames surged beneath his feet, radiating raw battle pressure. Their swords clashed again with a thunderous bang. Logan's counterattack struck deep into the knight's defenses. Pain flared through the knight's side. His body throbbed violently as old wounds tore open under pressure. He grunted, trying to hold firm. He staggered, barely managing to stay upright from the impact. "If it weren't for my injury," he cursed internally, frustration growing with each passing second. Logan dodged swiftly, fire trailing behind him. His sword flicked upward, forcing the knight completely off balance. The knight gasped in pain. Logan's blade struck cleanly, piercing through his defense with lightning-fast precision. Logan leapt back immediately, avoiding a desperate counterattack. Another explosion followed as his feet touched ground. The knight staggered, his breathing ragged. "There's no opening," he thought, unable to regain control under pressure. Blood trickled down his chin. "I need to find a chance to attack, but nothing works!" He panicked. The knight's eyes narrowed sharply. His grip tightened around his blade as a dangerous plan formed silently. A wicked grin spread across his face. He was ready to gamble everything on one final move. Logan inhaled deeply, eyes locked ahead. Calmly, he declared to himself, "I know exactly what to do." Logan's stance shifted slightly. His sword gleamed under the blazing light as he prepared for his technique. "The force from my sword," Logan thought carefully, channeling all his remaining energy into a decisive strike. Logan exhaled slowly, his eyes locked forward. He gathered every remaining ounce of strength for this moment. Flames surged wildly. The energy surrounding Logan compressed suddenly, drawing itself directly into his glowing sword. The enemy knight's expression shifted. The force, it's all being absorbed into his sword. He realized instantly, with a sinister grin, the knight thought, "Perfect. Feel for it. Just one misstep, and you'll fall." Logan's grip tightened, his mind cleared completely, focused solely on delivering a strike that would end everything. The knight charged forward with explosive speed, his crimson energy swirling violently around his armored figure. Logan countered instantly, flames trailing behind his sword as he moved to intercept the incoming attack. Both leapt into the air, colliding mid-flight. Energy rippled outward as their blades clashed with force. The knight smirked wickedly. "There! He'll lose his balance now!" he thought, preparing for a deadly counterstrike. Tightening his grip, the knight gathered remaining strength. This final blow would decide the outcome completely. Logan's foot landed solidly, his body steady. The knight's eyes lit up. "Now's my chance," he thought fiercely. Without hesitation, the knight's sword thrust forward at full speed, aiming straight for Logan's exposed side. The attack hit nothing but fabric. "His cape?" The knight gasped, realizing he had completely misjudged Logan's position. The knight turned his head sharply. Confusion spread across his face. Logan had disappeared from his vision. How did he move? The knight's mind raced, panic settling in as flames reflected in his eyes. The knight's breath caught. "No," he muttered, watching Logan step calmly out from the swirling fire. A chill ran through his spine. "Did I get slower?" he questioned, panic growing behind his eyes. Logan raised his sword. "Secret technique of the phantom blade," he whispered, fire coiling around the blade. Flames roared to life as Logan's sword ignited fully, signaling the technique's unstoppable final execution. "I need to get away!" the knight shouted, fear finally overwhelming his will to fight. Logan raised his flaming sword high. First technique, he declared firmly, his stance shifting into final execution. Wave cutter! Logan unleashed a devastating arc of energy, flames carving a brilliant path through the battlefield. The enemy knight's eyes widened. Impossible, he muttered, helpless before the overwhelming force heading straight toward him. The ground erupted violently, flames consumed everything ahead as a powerful shockwave echoed across the entire battlefield. From afar, Logan's father turned, eyes wide. He felt the wave's intensity before even seeing its reach. Logan watched silently, his breathing steady. Flames flickered gently around him, the battle nearing its inevitable conclusion. A massive explosion erupted, golden flames consuming everything ahead. The battlefield trembled beneath the overwhelming final strike. Logan exhaled sharply, his expression calm. Despite exhaustion, he stood tall, gaze locked on the settling dust. Smoke cleared slowly. Logan's silhouette stood alone amidst the swirling winds, victorious against all impossible odds. With quiet resolve, Logan raised his head. His battle was over, but his journey had just begun. Logan stood tall. An upper-class knight shouldn't resort to tricks, he muttered, eyes fixed on the fallen. The battlefield went silent. Logan raised his sword high, his voice ringing with absolute authority and triumph. I, Logan Messine, have killed the enemy commander! His declaration echoed powerfully across the stunned battlefield. The enemy soldiers panicked. The upper-class knight was defeated? One shouted. Fear quickly spread among their ranks. That's impossible! Another cried, disbelief written across every soldier's face. Their morale shattered completely in that moment. Chaos erupted. What about the Viscount? Was he killed too? Soldiers shouted, fear gripping their hearts tightly. I don't know. I haven't seen our flag in a while either. Panic spread across confused enemy ranks. Leaders screamed orders. What are you doing? Pick up your swords! Their voices drowned in growing despair. I'd rather surrender and keep my life. I don't want to die here. Soldiers dropped their weapons frantically. One by one, soldiers surrendered. I surrender! Me too! I surrender! Their voices rang across the battlefield. Cheers erupted across the battlefield. Long live Master Logan! The soldiers cried out, their voices filled with joy. Long live Master Logan! More voices joined, hope returning to faces once filled with fear and despair. Hooray! Soldiers threw their helmets into the air, celebrating the hard-fought victory against overwhelming odds. Long live Logan Messine! Long live the young master! Their voices echoed, swords raised high in triumph. One soldier shouted, the fight's not over yet, you fools! But the celebration had already consumed everyone. Galloping hard through the night, the defeated commander's mind raced, heart pounding against his armored chest. Where did we go wrong? He thought bitterly. The moon offered no answers to his desperate question. I've prepared 3 years for this. I even abandoned my own knights to secure better horses. His teeth clenched. That red-haired brat! He and his cavalry destroyed everything we planned so carefully. I must return to Teshin immediately, he resolved, gripping the reins tighter, disappearing into the cold night. If I reach the gates, I can make it out alive. The defeated lord thought desperately, galloping faster. He approached the stronghold. Guards stood alert, confused by the unexpected return in the dead of night. Open the castle gates! Your lord has returned! He shouted, voice cracking with urgency and overwhelming fear. The guards exchanged glances. My lord? One whispered, unsure if it was really him or a trick. Suddenly, rumbling echoed in the distance. Something's approaching! A guard shouted, eyes darting nervously beyond the walls. A thunderous rumble echoed through the night. The cavalry! The defeated lord gasped, panic overwhelming his senses. At the front, Logan rode fearlessly, eyes cold and focused, leading his forces toward the trembling stronghold. The defeated lord shivered uncontrollably. It's over! He realized grimly, cold chills racing down his spine. Logan halted his horse near the front line, assessing the aftermath of battle before advancing toward the fortress. Wounded troops dragged themselves through scattered corpses. Behind them, the once mighty enemy ranks were now completely broken. News spread quickly Teslan's elite unit had fallen. Victory was secured after days of intense siege. With strategic success achieved, Logan approached the castle and prepared to occupy it under formal military command. Inside the walls, enemy soldiers realized defeat too late. Confusion overtook them as surrender became inevitable. A commander shouted an urgent order. Panic spread fast as soldiers scrambled to reposition and brace themselves. An archer confirmed enemy numbers were small. Still, the defenders responded quickly, moving to reinforce the gate. Logan dismissed their assumptions. He calculated their weakness precisely, aware numbers alone wouldn't determine the battle's outcome. The defenders watched Logan closely. His sudden movement puzzled them. They hesitated, unsure of his next intention. Logan kicked off the ground. With speed and precision, he launched forward, initiating a surprise advance alone. Logan sprinted toward the castle gate. With sudden force, he launched himself high into the air. A soldier spotted Logan vanishing from sight. He turned pale, realizing something impossible was about to happen. Logan soared above the fortress wall. Defenders panicked, recognizing the threat far too late to react. Shouts rang out below. Soldiers pointed upward, stunned by Logan's leap and the boldness of his action. Now inside, Logan stood calmly. With blood on his sword, he ordered the enemy to surrender immediately. The castle's inner hall stood silent. Light poured in through windows as tension lingered in the air. A knight entered the treasury room alone. He scanned the area, ensuring no one else was present. He rushed forward and began searching. His hands moved quickly, pushing aside furniture and broken ornaments. Greed overtook caution. Fixated on treasure, he told himself this might be his only chance forever. Suddenly, a voice called out. He froze as a shadow stepped forward. Someone had caught him mid-theft. The knight sprang up in shock, demanding answers after discovering Logan had entered without permission or notice. Logan revealed the truth calmly. Servants had led him straight in, offering no resistance along the way. He added coldly that their cooperation showed how little respect they held for their own master. The accused lord's face stiffened. He glanced nervously at his subordinate, sensing the power balance had shifted. Logan didn't move. He stood firm, watching them both, letting silence deliver pressure heavier than his sword. One of the guards fled the room in panic, abandoning his master the moment tension rose. The lord clenched his teeth in rage, realizing betrayal had come from someone within his own ranks. He stumbled into the courtyard and stopped, raising both hands, declaring surrender to avoid further bloodshed. Desperate, the man offered full compensation and pleaded for mercy. Under traditional laws of territorial conflict, Logan repeated the words, skeptical. His expression made it clear tradition alone wouldn't guarantee mercy this time. Logan stepped forward slowly, sword at his side, questioning the man's audacity to invoke ancient customs. He stared coldly at the kneeling man, disgusted by his cowardice masked behind noble tradition. Logan shouted his name Haman Teslan, demanding if he felt any shame for abandoning duty and exploiting laws. Teslan begged, reminding Logan of a noble's honor and the rule forbidding executions during territorial war. Logan acknowledged the principle. He claimed House McLean valued honor, but his tone hinted at judgment coming. Teslan begged harder, appealing to Logan's ideals, believing mercy could still be won through words. Logan paused. He calmly replied that his father believed in honor and accepted surrender without conditions. He clarified it wasn't his father standing there. The hesitation in his expression quickly faded away. Teslan realized too late that Logan's judgment was final. He gasped in pain as consequences followed swiftly. Elsewhere, a knight entered the treasure vault. Unaware of events, he admired the untouched wealth inside. Logan stood over Teslan and coldly called him a worker unworthy of being called a noble. Drawing his blade, Logan refused negotiation. His firm tone made it clear mercy was no longer offered. Teslan panicked and extended his sword hilt, believing Logan might still accept it as a peace gesture. Logan smirked without speaking. He leaned forward slightly, signaling the end of the conversation through unspoken resolve. Without hesitation, Logan thrust his sword forward. Teslan's betrayal and pleas ended in one precise strike. Teslan collapsed in pain, clutching his wound. The shock in his eyes revealed fear more than injury. Desperate, he reminded Logan of a promise to spare his life. Hoping for one last chance, Logan calmly replied it was his father who might have shown mercy, not him, not today. Teslan coughed blood and muttered about noble honor. Logan scoffed, unmoved by the plea or its meaning. Logan leaned closer, voice cold. He demanded if Teslan understood how many lives were lost to greed. Logan declared the final sentence, condemning Teslan's disgraceful life to end on that very battlefield. With a clean motion, Logan drove his blade through Teslan's chest. Ending the confrontation without hesitation, Teslan gasped weakly, unable to respond. Blood flowed as the last traces of strength left his body. Logan stepped back silently, watching Teslan fall. The fight had ended, judgment had been fully delivered. Teslan's body lay motionless, soaked in blood. His defeat marked the end of House Teslan's legacy. Logan calmly rose to his feet, wiping blood from his blade after delivering the final strike. He clenched his fist tightly, standing over Teslan's corpse, breathing steadily as the weight settled in. Looking around the room, Logan reflected this was his first major step forward in reclaiming true power. He adjusted his stance and turned away from the body, determined to complete the task efficiently. Exhaling deeply, Logan refocused. With the first battle won, he prepared for what challenges lay ahead. A knight blew his horn urgently, signaling that something important had occurred within the fortress walls. He shouted loudly across the courtyard, declaring that Viscount Haman Teslan had taken his own life. The news echoed throughout the castle. Everyone paused, absorbing the final outcome of their fallen leader. Logan observed quietly from within. He confirmed that the story had been shaped exactly as needed. One of his men approached with urgency. Logan turned, calmly asking what the matter was now. A soldier approached Logan cautiously, preparing to deliver news as the two walked through the corridor. Days passed. The sky warmed over Teslan Castle as recovery efforts quietly unfolded inside the captured fortress. A red-haired man arrived at the gate, explaining he came immediately after recovering from prior injuries. He was stunned to hear that Haman had taken his own life following the crushing loss. Logan confirmed it calmly, stating that the Viscount had likely broken under pressure from complete military defeat. The red-haired knight placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. Logan didn't flinch but stood calmly. There was a long silence between them. Neither spoke, but understanding passed with one serious look. Logan broke the silence. He admitted clearly that he had personally ended Viscount Teslon's life. He explained that the Teslon territory rightfully belonged to House McLean, passed down from their ancestors. Logan stated firmly he eliminated the bloodline to avoid future claims or rebellion tied to the land. The older man accepted Logan's choice. He acknowledged that Logan likely had strong reasons for his actions. Logan stood quietly, surprised by the understanding tone. He realized his father's judgment had truly changed. His father reached out and gently called his name. Logan looked up, unsure what to expect. With steady conviction, he praised Logan, declaring him the true reason for their victory, despite what others thought. The moment sank in silently. Logan listened, hearing words he had longed to receive from his father. Logan smiled faintly for the first time in days, feeling relief after everything he endured. His father looked away briefly, clearing his throat, suppressing emotion he wasn't used to expressing openly. He shifted the topic with formality, preparing to announce something of long-term importance for House McLean. With clear intent, he declared Logan the official successor to their house, an heir chosen through merit. Hearing the words, Logan responded softly. This recognition from his father meant more than any battlefield victory. Logan's father gave a firm nod, acknowledging his son's strength and the decisions he had made. Logan stood confidently before the castle. The burden finally lifted as he embraced the role of successor. And with a calm smile, he whispered an apology, perhaps to the past, or to himself. Logan's father questioned him loudly, confused why Logan would reject the chance to officially lead their house. He assumed Logan feared damage to his reputation, assuring him the war's results would silence any doubt. Logan denied the assumption. He calmly stated that reputation was not the reason for his refusal. Logan explained that Lonian, his younger brother, was more qualified to lead House McLean into the future. He emphasized Lonian's early mastery of aura, achieved 5 years sooner than Logan himself had done. Logan explained calmly that Lonian's potential far exceeded normal expectations, making him an ideal future leader. His father remained silent, considering Logan's words as the sun set over the castle's upper walkway. Eventually, he responded, admitting strength alone was not enough to guide a nation or command loyalty. Logan accepted the point, but revealed he had already taken steps to guide Lonian's future wisely. In his thoughts, Logan recalled training Lonian secretly, to shape him differently than in their past timeline. Logan clarified he had no plans to waste his effort or the training given to successors. He expressed his desire to give Lonian a fair opportunity to prove himself as future leader. Logan formally requested the appointment decision be delayed until Lonian reached full maturity and proper evaluation. His father admitted surprise, impressed by Logan's concern for his younger brother's future and rightful position. He agreed to postpone the decision for 5 years, giving both sons equal opportunity to earn succession. Logan's father reminded him of traditional compensation, either territory, material reward, or gold for military achievement. Logan acknowledged the custom, then respectfully requested permission to select his own reward for his efforts. Some time passed. News of Logan's actions had begun spreading across the region. His presence awaited. Castle gates opened wide. Crowds cheered the returning warriors, recognizing the McLean crest leading from the front. Villagers murmured excitedly. A week had passed, and they were eager to learn how victory was secured. Citizens gathered in the streets, curious about the sudden return of McLean forces and their success. One man shared the rumors victory had come through the efforts of none other than Logan McLean. Surprised, another repeated the name Lotus, connecting Logan to the group that reversed the entire battle. They discussed how Logan's troops struck from behind, using unknown weapons to dismantle enemy formations with precision. Word spread fast. Logan had even defeated an elite knight alone. The people were in awe. The townspeople continued whispering, curious if Logan's past behavior had all been part of a strategy. Speculation spread. Some wondered if his arrogance had been a calculated act from the beginning. The crowd admired him openly now, inspired and impressed by his sudden transformation into a capable leader. Logan listened in silence. Internally, he cringed, finding their exaggerated praise awkward and difficult to accept. A fellow knight approached, teasing Logan about the attention. Logan remained quiet, unsure how to respond. Logan's companion encouraged him to smile, reminding him that the cheering crowd wanted to celebrate his return. Logan repeated the word quietly, unsure. It had been a long time since smiling felt natural. He glanced toward the townspeople. Their eager eyes sparkled, full of admiration and innocent excitement. Logan hesitated, unsure how to respond to that level of attention. Praise still felt unfamiliar to him. Standing before the crowd, Logan remained silent, gathering his thoughts before reacting to their sincere support. Logan finally smiled, but it wasn't warm. His expression twisted into something tense, sharp, and unsettling. Mounted on horseback, he grinned broadly. The gesture was meant to reassure, but it missed completely. The crowd recoiled. Their smiles froze. Unsure if Logan's expression was friendly or something far more dangerous, one citizen whispered nervously, mistaking the grin for a threat. Others panicked, thinking execution was implied. Logan moved on, unaware of their fear. His companion's side, public relations, clearly wasn't Logan's strength. Logan's father smiled proudly, satisfied with everything his son had accomplished despite past uncertainty and doubt. He called for a grand celebration, declaring Logan the hero whose leadership had secured their victory. The people erupted in cheers, voices rising in praise for House McLean and its victorious young master. Meanwhile, the castle stood tall and silent, awaiting the return of those who had earned their place. Logan quietly stepped away from the noise, retreating to gather his thoughts in solitude and calm. Logan wandered the quiet corridor, questioning how others still had energy to celebrate after everything ended. Suddenly, a voice shouted in rage. Logan flinched as his mother's furious words echoed behind him. He turned, stunned, as she approached. Her voice was sharp, accusing him of deception and manipulation. She declared she had overheard his decision to decline succession and suspected hidden motives behind it. Another woman tried to calm her, explaining the mother's distress stemmed from unresolved family matters and pain. Logan reassured Lonian with a calm smile, signaling that there was no need to worry further. He watched his mother quietly, reflecting on her position once powerful, now broken by political betrayal and loss. For years, Logan suspected she resented him. But now, her influence within the family had vanished. With her no longer a threat, Logan considered it might be time to express long-held forgiveness. He turned his gaze downward, preparing himself to approach sincerely, with words he had never spoken before. Logan addressed his mother directly, acknowledging that his past behavior had not earned her trust or respect. He admitted his past arrogance had clouded his judgment and made him act with unjustified superiority. His mother seized the moment, trying to prove a point, interrupting his heartfelt apology with her outburst. Lonian tried calming her down, but Logan continued firmly, stating Lonian was the one owed this apology. Logan clarified that although he had apologized before, he never truly explained what he was sorry for. Logan admitted silently that years of regret had never been enough to overcome his fear and hesitation. Lonian asked what Logan meant, sensing something serious in his brother's sudden change in tone. Logan explained clearly he had despised Lonian for years, and Lonian likely already knew this in truth. Lonian stood frozen, the words hitting harder than expected. His silence confirmed he had sensed it before. Their mother watched, unsure whether to interrupt. As Logan's honesty began opening old wounds neither had addressed, Logan stepped forward and admitted to everyone present that his actions toward Lonian had been unfair. He lowered his head, finally offering the apology he had withheld for too long. Facing Lonian directly, Logan expressed sincere regret, stating clearly that he was sorry for his past behavior. Lonian's expression shifted. He raised his head slowly, the tension in his posture clear to everyone nearby. Lonian thought to himself bitterly an apology, no matter how honest, couldn't erase the damage already done. Lonian clenched his fist tightly, suppressing the pain stirred by Logan's apology and the memories behind it. After a pause, he finally responded. His voice was calm. He said it was all right. Logan looked up, surprised by the response, uncertain if forgiveness was truly being offered without resentment. Facing his brother fully, Lonian explained that despite Logan's coldness, he had always held on to faith. Lonian's expression softened. He began to share what he truly believed about Logan. Despite past rejection, Lonian smiled warmly, showing no resentment. His sincerity left Logan speechless, overwhelmed by quiet gratitude and relief. Logan questioned himself, wondering why he had waited so long when reconciliation had always been this simple. He turned to his mother, seeking understanding, ready to express a truth he had long hidden. Logan declared openly that he truly cared for Lonian not out of duty, but from genuine affection. A childhood memory returned Logan laughing beside Lonian, a moment of bond that had once felt unbreakable. Logan looked at his mother and asked her not to turn away from him again. He requested she continue watching him, his decisions, his actions, so she could judge him through truth alone. She stood quietly, listening as Logan's voice remained steady, filled with new purpose and self-control. Logan smiled, confident. He didn't need approval now, only the chance to be truly seen. Under the moonlight, he accepted that for now, being understood was enough to keep going. Morning sunlight warmed the forest trail as Logan and his companion walked deeper into familiar woodland paths. Their footsteps echoed softly. The silence between them was filled with the scent of grass and trees. The older man asked nervously why Logan was already heading somewhere just after returning from war. Logan answered with a slight grin, saying rest was over, it was time to return to work. Grumbling, the older man admitted Logan's pace unsettled him. Logan simply smiled, undeterred by the complaint. The elder scoffed quietly, doubting Logan's intentions. He questioned how Logan could know his true preferences. He followed reluctantly, unaware that Logan had carefully considered even the smallest details of their destination and timing. Logan smiled as they arrived, sensing the elder's surprise. It was a moment they could share. Looking out across the peaceful valley, Logan spoke with resolve. Starting today, everything will be different again. Logan father surveyed the horizon, already planning ahead. He needed a strategic position to begin his foundation. He selected a remote hill near Teslon's border, a quiet, overlooked place with hidden importance. Though dismissed as worthless by others, Logan remembered its future value from his previous life's experiences. The land's barren look meant nothing. Logan knew its location would shape a decisive future event. Unknown to all, the Teslon house once fought hard for this land, and Logan knew why. Logan's group traveled through snow-covered roads, heading toward the isolated hill he'd chosen to reclaim first. The wagon carried essential supplies. Their goal, establish a base and begin construction before winter deepened. Inside a darkened outpost, unknown enemies observed. One relayed orders to eliminate anyone near the location. Footsteps echoed inside a cold hallway. Logan's enemy had begun moving before he even arrived. A black armored knight accepted the command. His target, any trespassers daring to step near the hill. Logan found imprisoned miners behind cold bars. Their faces were anxious, waiting for someone to listen. The oldest miner stepped forward, claiming innocence. They had only followed orders given by Viscount Teslon. They explained how Teslon had accused them falsely after assigning them to extract gold from his land. Logan clenched his fist in silence. Losing skilled technicians this way was wasteful and clearly intentional. He realized Teslon's sabotage ran deeper than expected. Logan would need these miners for what came next. Logan gritted his teeth. The betrayal by Teslon wasn't minor, it was calculated, cruel, and deeply personal. The miner stepped back, startled. Logan's sharp expression revealed a buried fury he struggled to keep hidden. Teslon's influence wasn't local. His manipulation reached across regions, damaging even minor lords caught in political tides. Like a lone ship caught in stormy waters, Logan's faction drifted under constant imperial and noble pressure. With the empire looming overhead, Logan's rebellion risked collapse. Yet the storm would soon expose hidden strength. A monstrous creature struck with terrifying force. The ship's fate was sealed in a single moment. That violent attack marked the beginning. The kingdom's decline started with a loss no one expected. The death of King Samuel von Grandia created a power vacuum that fractured the kingdom's fragile order. 3 princes, driven by ambition, ignited a civil war that exhausted armies and divided regional loyalties. With no strong leader, noble factions took control. Battles over influence continued unchecked across the continent. Logan assessed the political landscape. House McLean remained neutral, refusing to back any of the princes. Yet neutrality offered no gain. Logan saw the civil war as a rare window of opportunity. He resolved to act using the Empire's instability to restore McLean's former strength and reclaim lost territories. Beyond victory, Logan held a deeper goal: to end the war and reshape the region's future. His thoughts paused as a voice called to him. Someone had arrived, and the plan would begin. Logan asked about the surroundings. The old foreman responded, revealing the group's readiness and subtle anxiety. 5 released miners gathered behind him. Though hesitant, they stood in formation, awaiting Logan's next decision. Logan caught himself overthinking. The plan had barely begun. There was no room for careless hesitation now. He considered increasing military power soon, but knew suggesting that now would only confuse or unsettle everyone. Accepting the burden quietly, Logan resolved to fund it himself. Progress had to begin from personal commitment. Logan stared at the hill ahead. It wasn't just terrain, it was the start of everything planned. He revealed a gold vein hidden within. Mining it would supply the funds for his larger ambition. Smiling confidently, Logan addressed the miners. He knew this single project would test their trust and skill. The foreman grumbled. Logan's demand sounded bold, too bold for men used to simpler, safer work orders. Some miners whispered doubts. Teslon paid less, but didn't ask them to excavate full-scale gold deposits. Logan insisted confidently gold was definitely in the hill. His certainty startled the others into brief silence. When asked for proof, Logan declared he saw it himself, confusing them with his mysterious conviction. The foreman was stunned. No prospector could see veins underground. Logan's claim defied their practical knowledge. Logan added one more condition: secrecy. Only 6 men would handle the drilling and excavation entirely. The foreman exploded in frustration. Mining gold with just 6 people felt reckless, nearly suicidal in scope. One miner ran to the foreman in panic, begging him to reason with Logan immediately. Desperate, he pleaded, declaring the task impossible. The other miners watched closely, waiting for the foreman's judgment. The foreman remained silent for a moment, weighing the request against the situation Logan had presented. He finally responded. If they worked like their lives depended on it, the job was technically possible. Joking grimly, he added they'd need to abandon sleep and comfort. Panic spread among the miners. Logan smiled calmly. Despite the protests, he believed this hill would become the key to everything. He asked for cost details. The miners hesitated, glancing toward the mountain, unsure where to begin. The foreman explained, drilling would confirm the gold's presence, but setup alone needed 5 million gold up front. Safety was another concern. Preparations and execution combined would take close to 1 full year minimum. Logan processed the answer. The cost in money and time was high but not unexpected at all. Logan reflected on monster meat. In the future, its true medicinal value wouldn't be discovered for years. He realized if he could process and sell the meat now, it could fund the mine. Pausing, he considered the poison. But he remembered, the toxin could be neutralized with known field agents. Logan had used those mixtures many times. Making the antidote himself was entirely within his skill set. With a smirk, Logan saw a new path forward: sell processed meat to fund the gold operation. The neutralizing agent was finally complete. Logan stood ready to begin the second phase of preparation. A worker proudly reported the formula blended from moonrise grass, plot herbs, and hardy wild rocky grass. Logan corrected him firmly. It wasn't medicine, just a neutralizer needed for processing monster meat safely. Logan confirmed the meat was also secured. Everything necessary for launching production was now in place. With urgency, Logan ordered a visit to the storage room. They'd begin treating the meat immediately. The assistant panicked, refusing to enter. His loud protest drew attention as Logan approached with confusion. He claimed Logan didn't understand the smell. Logan narrowed his eyes, sensing something was definitely wrong inside. Logan stepped forward and caught a whiff. The stench hit hard, thick, rotting, and completely overwhelming. It wasn't normal decay. Logan staggered back, realizing the meat's condition was far worse than expected. Holding back vomit, he accepted the grim reality: monster meat rotted faster than he remembered. A critical mistake. Logan steadied himself, channeling inner energy to suppress the stench before it overwhelmed his concentration. He exhaled calmly, unaffected. The assistant watched in disbelief as Logan showed no sign of discomfort. Logan moved forward, ready to work. The assistant panicked, confused by Logan's unnatural resistance to the smell. Logan casually revealed he'd used force techniques to block his sense of smell during the process. With the antidote in hand, Logan instructed them to begin using the neutralizer on the meat. Logan handed over the neutralizer. The assistant hesitated, complaining again as the meat's smell overwhelmed him. Logan demonstrated the method, chopping the rancid monster meat into manageable chunks for better neutralization and handling. He showed the next step, compressing each piece into small round balls ready for packaging. The assistant was surprised by the result. The treated meat looked more like medicine than food. Logan declared the new assignment: mass produce and sell it as medicine. The assistant panicked at the responsibility. The assistant tried to negotiate payment. Logan sighed, realizing his plan to get free labor failed. Logan changed the subject, suggesting a test to measure how effective the neutralized meat truly was. The assistant asked for clarification. Logan casually said the medicine would benefit men's physical vitality in particular. Confused, the assistant pressed for details. Logan told him to focus. As he'd only explained once, nearby animals trembled from earlier experiments. The results had clearly affected them, proof the medicine had strong effects. A cheerful rabbit stepped forward, seemingly chosen to test the new medicine's effects firsthand. The darker rabbit bit into the treated meatball without hesitation, eyes fixed on the target. It walked up to a wooden post and struck it firmly, showing immediate energy buildup. Suddenly, its strikes multiplied in speed and force. The rabbit's power surged unnaturally fast with each hit. In moments, the rabbit transformed muscular, aggressive, unstoppable. Everyone present froze as it shattered the post completely. The impact shook the building. Inside, everyone was stunned by the rabbit's sudden, terrifying transformation. Logan turned to his assistant, ensuring the process was understood. The assistant nodded, still half shocked. Realizing the effect, Logan suggested they try the medicine on someone suitable for a proper field test. And then, curious, Logan asked who the assistant had in mind for such a bold demonstration. Assistant pointed confidently: Dwayne Pilsner, a large, rugged man who had just arrived with documents in hand. Dwayne stood outside, calling politely. He waited for permission before entering the estate, holding reports tightly. After receiving approval, he stepped inside calmly, unaware of what awaited him beyond the doorway. He looked around and called out again, confused by the eerie silence throughout the manor interior. Suddenly, Logan appeared from above, cloaked in shadow, eyes glowing with mischief. "I've been waiting, Dwayne!" Dwayne screamed as Logan lunged down. The ambush startled him enough to drop everything he was carrying. Logan sat with Dwayne, acknowledging the burden he had endured throughout the long and difficult war. Dwayne humbly declined the concern, insisting others had it worse. Logan noted how exhausted he appeared. Logan continued, highlighting the territory's bankruptcy and the endless demands from soldiers and servants alike. He stressed that administrators like Dwayne bore the heaviest weight now, caught between expectation and shortage. Dwayne, touched and surprised, wiped his tears. He hadn't expected such thoughtful words from the young master. Dwayne froze, sweating nervously. Realizing Logan's seriousness, he tried thinking of something to regain control fast. Logan turned to leave. Dwayne panicked and begged him to wait. He wasn't done talking yet. In desperation, Dwayne offered a mysterious item, hoping it would convince Logan to reconsider his cold retreat. He claimed it was a famous product from Kyle. Even one pill guaranteed immediate potent results. Logan listened, unimpressed. He swallowed it without hesitation, ready to test this so-called miracle for himself. Dwayne clutched his chest, still overwhelmed. The effects of the pill had left a deep impression. Driven by excitement and urgency, he sprinted through the halls, seeking Logan without a second thought. He found Logan ahead. Others noticed and scolded him for running so wildly in the corridor. Panting, Dwayne ignored their comments. His mind was fixed on the medicine and its potential. Desperate, he shouted the real question: how much would it cost to buy that powerful medicine? Logan grinned with satisfaction. The trial had worked. The medicine was officially a complete and undeniable success. While Logan celebrated, his assistant tried to regain his attention, struggling to keep up with instructions. Logan ignored the comment and faced Dwayne directly, ordering him to hold out his hand. Dwayne hesitated, but stepped forward slowly. His nervous expression showed equal parts fear and anticipation. Sweat rolled down his cheek. Whatever Logan was about to do next had him completely on edge. Dwayne dropped to one knee, his face tensed, overwhelmed by a rush of sensation and transformation. Logan stepped back slightly, watching carefully. The reaction was stronger than expected. Something powerful was clearly happening, and the assistant stared in awe. Even he could sense that Dwayne's presence had completely shifted. Everyone paused as the tension filled the room. The air shimmered with anticipation and something unknown. Bathed in golden light, Dwayne knelt before Logan, changed, humbled, and visibly altered by the medicine's effect. Logan sat at his desk. A knight entered, alarmed about strange rumors spreading around town. Before the man could object further, Logan shoved a pill into his mouth without hesitation. This knight, Heinkel, was now the second test subject chosen without warning or detailed explanation. Heinkel swallowed, then suddenly felt heat surging through his body. His expression changed instantly. A burst of energy ignited. Heinkel's legs moved involuntarily, his body reacting faster than his mind could. Logan dismissed Heinkel kindly, telling him to go home to his wife and rest properly. And he assured Heinkel he'd explain everything to his father, covering for him without hesitation. The grateful and smiling, Heinkel expressed his thanks, clearly moved by Logan's unexpected show of support. And Heinkel bowed and took his leave, still glowing from the medicine's effect. And Logan's gesture, another voice called out. Patrick, the next candidate, hesitated, already nervous about what Logan planned next. Patrick blushed as he turned away, trying to gather his courage while heading toward the door. The door closed behind him. Something about his demeanor hinted that nerves had completely taken over. Logan watched him go, internally chuckling. He suspected the medicine might spark more than just strength. Suddenly, another assistant panicked, shouting out. He was frustrated Logan hadn't chosen him for testing yet. Clutching his chest dramatically, he demanded to know why he hadn't received the medicine first. Logan stared at the assistant, saying nothing. His silence felt heavier than any direct answer could. And the assistant stepped back nervously, clearly unsettled. Logan's cold gaze had said more than words. Logan turned his head slightly, glancing again. There was calculation behind every move he made. The assistant called out, demanding clarification. He couldn't understand why Logan was acting so cryptic now. Logan remained quiet. Internally, he debated something deeper, his face calm but his mind unsettled. Logan walked away, brushing off the assistant's complaints. He gave a blunt remark and kept moving. Elsewhere, a glowing orb lit the room. A discussion began about the medicine's market potential. And then, Logan confidently named the price. 100 gold each, or 1,000 for a pack. The nobleman listening was skeptical. He warned Logan not to underestimate the intelligence of capital's elite. Logan smiled calmly, insisting he wasn't. He simply knew how well the product would sell. Logan's contact acknowledged the potential. If the medicine worked, people would surely pay the asking price. They agreed that public proof would help. A well-known figure using it could trigger widespread trust. Still, the man questioned what noble would admit impotence just to promote a cure for it. Logan smiled knowingly. Word of mouth would do the job. No noble needed to say a word. The contact considered that. He suggested Logan first attend banquets in the capital to build buzz. Logan reflected silently. His future hinged on this plan, and he needed every noble's attention soon. The broker confirmed banquets were ideal for connections. Building trust, though, would take time and effort. He reminded Logan that medicine couldn't be sold directly at noble gatherings. It would damage their reputation. Logan understood. Instead of selling, he'd just attend and let the rumors spread naturally among nobles. Logan then offered a new lead, an information broker who could confirm everything he was planning. Logan smiled with intent, informing Philip that he would meet him in the capital very soon. Philip's unease grew. Logan's grin and mysterious tone gave him a deep sense of foreboding. A week passed. Logan stepped confidently onto the stone streets of Grand, the kingdom's bustling capital. He took in the sights. The city felt different, grand and overwhelming, yet full of opportunity. Philip greeted him, shocked. He questioned how Logan got permission to come under House McLean's name. Philip questioned Logan's authority. He still couldn't believe Logan traveled under House McLean's name without restriction. Logan explained calmly. Gaining permission was easier than expected, though requesting no servant raised some initial issues. He smiled to himself, thinking his war contributions likely played a big role in that approval. Philip recalled Logan's independence. It wasn't the first time he'd traveled alone despite his noble status. Logan shrugged it off. Traveling with a servant would only slow him down and draw attention. Logan fell silent, recalling a name, Rick. A familiar loyalty began surfacing from his buried memories. Just like in Logan's past life, Rick had always followed orders without hesitation or question. Then Rick worked tirelessly, even sacrificing his rest days. He smiled while enduring Logan's relentless requests. And despite hardships, Rick stayed close. Rejected by others, he wondered if he'd ever find love. Logan reflected on Rick's small lies, his stolen medicine, and unwavering service, grateful for his unspoken devotion. Philip glanced to the side, sensing something strange. A faint vision flickered past his eyes. Unexpectedly, Logan raised his voice with confidence, declaring Rick's contribution worthy of immortalizing through the product's name. With a bold grin, Logan shouted the official name, Impo Rick. Philip stood frozen, visibly disturbed and speechless. Logan returned from his long journey. The noble greeted him, suggesting a tavern for comfort. But Logan shook his head, wary of spies. Loose lips among nobles could spark dangerous consequences. He proposed retreating to private lodgings. Only there could truths be shared without risk of exposure. The attendant revealed he'd consulted an information broker, but the result brought only confusion and irritation. Logan stared at the paper, stunned. 900 gold? The broker's price was criminally inflated. The assistant clarified he followed Logan's exact phrasing while requesting sensitive information from the broker. The data included nobles in Gerard, married yet childless for over a decade, clearly matching Logan's intent. Another list focused on nobles who avoided affairs, suggesting discipline or hidden complications in their lineage. A third set tracked nobles obsessed with virility-enhancing foods, hinting desperation or concealed physical deficiencies. Logan reviewed the intelligence, pleased. Despite recent conflict, this detailed profiling could expose a secret heir. Logan overheard a dismissive remark about monster meat, triggering a sudden thought tied to the list. Without delay, he slammed the document into the assistant's chest, silencing his pointless speculation instantly. Startled, the assistant yelped from the impact, surprised that a mere paper could sting so sharply. Logan leaned forward, demanding insight. He wanted a name, the ideal noble to approach first with bait. The assistant hesitated, scanning the page. Logan waited calmly, knowing the first move would shape everything. Logan studied the names closely. The handwriting revealed connections he hadn't expected to see on paper. He turned to his assistant, voice calm but tense. Confirmation was needed before taking the next step. Logan froze, recognizing one name instantly. A noble he'd suspected, now clearly linked through the investigation's threads. Preparations began. The chandelier-lit banquet hall was chosen for subtle approach, public enough, yet controlled by allies. Among the guests, one noble smiled carelessly, unaware Logan's plan had already set its eyes on him. Nobles laughed around the chandelier's glow. Logan walked in silently, observing the target at the center. With confidence, Logan called out to Count Davis. Catching the group's attention with deliberate formality, Davis turned, puzzled. Logan introduced himself, firmly eldest son of Baron McCline, returning from the borderlands. Logan's bold entrance silenced murmurs. His colorful outfit and upright stance declared purpose louder than words. Count Davis feigned calm, but his lips trembled. Logan's arrival disrupted the balance he carefully maintained. Nobles whispered mockingly about Logan's clothing, unaware it was chosen precisely to draw a shallow judgment. Logan stood firm, unfazed. Blending showiness with presence, he ensured no one could ignore his arrival. His mind stayed sharp. He wasn't here to mingle, only to confront one man, Count Davis. Count Davis was wealthy, childless, and influential, traits that matched Logan's target profile from the information list. Logan remembered clearly Davis died in despair in his past life. That tragic fate made him suspicious. The scandal began with a loud scene. Count Davis's wife shouted at him before many guests. No one knew the full truth, but her insult at the banquet left a lasting scar. Public humiliation from his own wife shattered Davis's pride, pushing him deeper into shame and isolation. Logan recalled the tragic end. Davis's downfall came from status anxiety and others' opinions, not war. Now Logan confirmed it. Davis matched all the criteria. He was ideal for initiating the planned setup. Count Davis boasted that Grand offered everything, implying Logan's attempt to sell would be futile here. Despite the mockery, Logan stayed composed. He hinted that his product came from experience, not location. Logan smiled confidently, declaring his product truly unique, crafted for a need no one else addressed. He stepped forward with purpose, making it clear this wasn't a bluff, it was a strategic move. Leaning closer, Logan whispered that his product catered specifically to men, targeting Davis's greatest hidden insecurity directly. A nobleman sensed tension rising as whispers about a scandalous transaction reached his ears during the gathering. Suppressing fury, he gritted his teeth. The implication threatened not just reputation but the honor of nobility itself. He strode forward aggressively, unable to tolerate disgrace. His outburst drew attention to the accusations spreading quickly. Other nobles turned to the noise. Among them, Logan remained composed, calmly observing the scene unfold. The furious noble watched Logan in silence, seething. He viewed Logan's confidence as arrogance unfit for their rank. Logan assessed the crowd calmly, knowing well that any reaction now would shape his standing. Rather than argue, he offered a gift meant to display both diplomacy and the value he carried. From his coat, he presented a case containing pills, each said to be worth a fortune. He handed 3 pills to Count Davis, ensuring the gesture appeared formal, respectful, and without hesitation. With noble conviction, Logan declared the pills safe and effective, binding his words to personal honor. Several days later, a knock echoed at the shop's door, signaling a new customer's arrival. A butler stepped in, presenting documentation. His master wished to buy the medicine called Impo Rick. Hearing House Davis, Logan immediately recognized success. His strategy had worked exactly as he had planned. The purchase completed, the butler left quietly. Logan's polite farewell masked his excitement beneath a formal tone. Logan waited in the shadows as deliveries began. Business was moving faster than he'd first expected. 1 month later, Logan's business expanded into a central building, perfectly placed in the heart of capital. Logan explained the location's importance. Its visibility alone was drawing crowds, boosting product trust and perceived value. His assistant noted Logan's relentless presence at banquets, networking daily, sometimes twice, to promote their product face-to-face. Logan emphasized the bigger goal. Count Davis was only the beginning. More influential targets were now necessary. With a determined grin, Logan vowed to personally meet everyone on the list to expand reach. The butler returned to the store, tasked once again with acquiring medicine for his ailing master. He grumbled quietly, doubting the product's effects. None of the other remedies had improved the count. Approaching the shop, he noticed a crowd gathering. Something felt off, and his pace slowed instinctively. As he turned the corner, the sheer size of the crowd caught him completely by surprise. Staring ahead, he was stunned. The line stretched endlessly, far more people than he'd ever expected. While waiting, the butler recognized other noble servants. Word of the medicine had clearly spread widely. Seeing familiar faces, he grew anxious. Being recognized might cause rumors to circulate among higher-ranking houses. He entered discreetly, hoping to avoid attention. Securing the medicine quickly was now his only goal. To his shock, the clerk apologized. The entire stock of Impo Rick had already sold out that morning. He stood frozen, overwhelmed. Until now, he never imagined demand could outpace even a noble's request. The butler panicked, realizing returning without the medicine might cost him more than just reputation. A noble, noticing the crowd, sent his servant to investigate the sudden commotion outside the shop. Logan observed discreetly. The scarcity strategy was working, drawing attention and urgency from nobles all around. His assistant repeated the message loudly, turning disappointment into desire. Stock gone. Return early the next day. With another day's supply gone, he confirmed success. Demand was skyrocketing beyond their production pace. Crowds rushed in as the shop opened. Within minutes, every pill was gone once again. A nobleman shouted in disbelief. It was becoming routine, sold out before half the buyers even entered. Inside, Logan's assistant smiled. The momentum hadn't slowed. Their product remained the capital's most demanded item. He reported they sold out instantly again. Monthly revenue could soon reach an astonishing 4.5 million. Logan leaned back, confident. Stacks of gold coins in front of him confirmed the plan's success. Logan listened as Philip shared rising projections. Demand kept increasing, pushing their profits even higher daily. Philip's gaze lingered with concern. Logan's growing ambition was intense, perhaps even dangerous for the kingdom's balance. Logan grinned knowingly. He understood the risk, but the results were far too rewarding to resist. Bursting with laughter, Logan celebrated loudly. Outside their store stood tall, a symbol of unexpected dominance. Logan embraced Philip with pride. His loyal partner had helped transform a plan into an empire. Logan, satisfied with the results, rewarded Philip with a share 1% of next month's profits. Overwhelmed with joy, Philip pledged to work even harder, though his excitement became a little much. Their noisy celebration startled a passerby, who turned toward the store after hearing the sudden commotion. In the shadows, a bearded man observed everything silently. His eyes gleamed with quiet, calculated interest.